Welcome back to Potter Red, where the magic the world forgot still has a pulse. Today's story: Harry found Rowena Ravenclaw's living portrait at age 7 and learned the magic the world forgot. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so a story like this one never slips past you. Comfortable? Good, let's begin. Chapter 1: The House at the End of Old Mill Lane. There were 3 reliable facts about being chased by Dudley Dursley's gang, and Harry had worked all 3 out by the time he was 7. The first was that they were faster than him over short distances and slower over long ones because they ate 4 meals a day and he ate the leftovers, which made him light. The second was that they always fanned out at corners, which meant a corner was a trap unless you took it at the last possible second and forced them to commit before you did. The third and most useful was that none of them ever thought about where they were going. They thought about Harry. So if Harry thought about where he was going, he had an entire faculty working that they did not. He was thinking about it now, ribs going like a fist opening and closing, trainers slapping the pavement of Magnolia Road. Piers Polkiss was somewhere off his left shoulder, breathing in wet whistles. Dudley was behind, which was good. Dudley behind meant Dudley could not herd. The trick was to keep him there. "Get him by the bins," Dudley shouted, which told Harry exactly where the bins were and therefore where not to go. He cut right down the alley between the paddles, fence, and the garages where the council had stacked paving slabs 3 years ago and never come back for them. Harry knew the slabs were there. Piers did not. There was a thud and a yelp and a scrape of skin on stone, and then there were only 2 of them, and the 2 of them were Dudley and Malcolm, who were the 2 slowest. That was when Harry made the mistake. He looked back. Looking back cost 1/5 of a second and 3 feet of light, and Malcolm, who had longer legs than sense, used both. A hand closed on the back of Harry's jumper, and the world swung and the curb came up to meet his knees. He did not cry. Crying was a thing you spent, and he had learned to be careful with it. "Hold him," Dudley said, arriving last and breathing like a kettle. He liked to arrive last. It let him give orders to people who had done the work. Harry looked at the toes of Dudley's enormous trainers and did the arithmetic of the next 10 minutes the way other children might count sheep. There would be the part where Dudley decided what to do. There would be the part where Dudley described what he was going to do at length because the describing was the part he liked. And there would be a gap somewhere in the describing where Malcolm's grip loosened because Malcolm was a follower, and followers stopped paying attention the moment someone more important started talking. The gap came on the word "gonna," as it usually did. Dudley said, "I'm gonna," and Malcolm's fingers slackened to hear the rest, and Harry was already moving, already twisting under the loose arm and down and out, leaving Malcolm holding a fistful of empty air and the indignant feeling of a person who has dropped something he was certain he was holding. Then Harry was running again, and this time he did not look back, and he did not go toward home, because home was where they expected, and a person who went where he was expected was a person who got caught. He went the other way, down Magnolia Road to the end, past the last of the houses with their hanging baskets and their burglar alarms in little white boxes, to where the pavement gave up and turned to a lane the council had stopped mowing. The street sign said Old Mill Lane in letters so faded they were more a rumor of letters than the thing itself. Beyond it, the hedges grew across each other like fingers laced in prayer, and at the end of it, set back behind a gate that had rusted shut in the shape of being open, was the house the older children called the Crow House. Harry stopped at the gate, hands on his knees, dragging the warm afternoon into his lungs. Behind him, faintly, he could hear Dudley's gang giving up, the particular jeering note they used to pretend that stopping had been their idea. In front of him, the house waited. He had never been past the gate. That was the whole of the lore the schoolyard had on the place. Nobody went past the gate. Wayne Hopkins said a man had died in there and his crows still lived in the chimneys and pecked the eyes out of anyone who slept under the roof. Sally Ann said it wasn't crows, it was that the floor wasn't a real floor, that you'd step on what looked like boards and go straight down into the well underneath. Harry had noticed that the stories never agreed with each other, which was usually how you could tell a story had been made up rather than seen. People who had actually seen a thing agreed on the boring parts. What Harry could see standing at the gate was a tall, narrow house of gray brick gone green at the gutters, with a front door the color of a drowned plum and windows that did not catch the light the way the other windows on Magnolia Road caught it. He noticed that last part and could not say why it bothered him. The paddles windows threw the sun back at you in hard white squares. These windows held the light the way a deep pond holds it, somewhere down and in, and gave none of it back. A boy with sense would go home. Harry went in. The gate did not open because the gate had rusted into the open shape and could not, but there was a gap beside it where the railings had pulled loose from the brick, and Harry was light, and Harry was thinking about where he was going. He turned sideways and breathed out, and the gap took him, and then he was standing in a garden that had eaten itself. Roses gone to thorny ropes, a bird bath under a wig of moss, gravel paths you could only find by the way the weeds grew shorter over them. The afternoon was loud with the ordinary world, a lawnmower 3 gardens over, a radio, a plane drawing its white scratch across the blue. Harry walked up the buried path toward the drowned plum door, and with every step the ordinary world got quieter, the way sound drops when you put your head under bathwater. By the time he reached the door, the lawnmower was gone. The radio was gone. He could hear his own heartbeat and the faint, dry sound of something settling inside the house, the way old houses settle, except that old houses settle at night when the heat goes out of them, and it was 4 o'clock on a June afternoon and warm enough to fry an egg on the gate. The door was locked. He knew it would be before he tried it. Locked was simply the kind of thing this door was. But there was a coal hole at the side of the house, a round iron cover sunk into the path, and the cover had been lifted and set back crooked recently by someone with hands smaller than a coalman's. Harry crouched and looked at the scrape marks in the dirt, fresh, narrow, a child's or a thin adult's. He should have wondered who. Instead, he wondered whether, which was the difference between Harry and almost everyone he knew. He levered the cover up, and it came easier than iron that size should come, and below it was a chute angling down into the dark, worn smooth, just wide enough. He sat on the lip with his legs dangling into the cool and thought about the well under the floor and the crows in the chimney, and decided on the available evidence that both were lies. Then he pushed off. The chute delivered him onto a heap of long-dead coal dust that puffed up gray and got in his teeth. He sat in the black, blinking until the dark resolved into the merely dim. A cellar with a low brick ceiling, a wooden stair going up and light coming down the stair, and a thin gray wedge from the open door at the top. The open door at the top. Harry sat very still and listened with his whole skin. Nothing. Then, far off and above, the dry settling sound again, and under it, so quiet he might have made it up, a voice, not words. Just the shape a voice makes, a single low syllable, the kind of sound a person makes to themselves while reading. He could leave. The chute went up as well as down, probably with effort. He climbed the stair instead, because a voice in an empty house was the most interesting thing that had ever happened to him, and Harry had learned early that interesting things did not come around so often that you could afford to waste them on being sensible. The door at the top opened onto a hall floored in black and white tiles, half of them lifted by a damp that had come up through the foundations decades ago and dried again, so the floor rose and fell like a tide caught in stone. Dust lay over everything in a gray felt except, and Harry stopped, because this was the kind of detail people who had actually seen a thing agreed on, except for a track through the dust. Footprints, the same narrow feet that had moved the coal hole cover. They went down the hall, past a staircase, to a door under the stairs, and they came back and they went again, many times, the way you wear a path to a thing you cannot stop returning to. Harry followed them, walking in the prints so he would leave less of himself behind, which was a habit from a life spent trying to leave less of himself behind. The footprints stopped at the wall, not at a door. At the wall, a blank stretch of paneled oak between the understairs cupboard and a tall, ugly clock that had stopped at 20 to 4. The narrow feet had stood here, over and over, facing the paneling and gone no further because there was no further to go. Harry put his hand on the panel. He could not afterward have told anyone why. It was not a decision the way deciding to run down the alley with the paving slabs had been a decision. It was more like the feeling you get when a word is on the tip of your tongue and your mouth starts to make the shape of it before you've remembered what it is. His palm flattened against the cool oak, and under the oak, under the cool, was a warmth, very faint, the warmth of a thing that is alive and breathing slowly in its sleep, and Harry's hand knew the shape of that warmth the way his mouth knew the shape of the half-remembered word. He pressed. The panel did not swing or slide. It simply stopped being a wall and started being a doorway, with no movement in between that his eye could catch, as though the wall had only ever been pretending and had now grown bored of the game. Cold air came out of the dark beyond it, smelling of old paper and colder stone and something sweetish underneath, like the inside of a violin. "Took you," said a voice from inside the dark, dry as turning pages, rather longer than I expected, though I will allow that I had set the expectation unfairly. "Come in, child, and stop letting the warmth out. I have little enough of it." Harry did not run. He noted that he wanted to, noted that his legs had gone interested in the door behind him and overruled them because the voice had said child the way you'd say it to a person, and not the way Aunt Petunia said boy, which was the way you'd address a stain. He stepped inside. The room beyond the wall was small and tall, a study built into what should have been solid house, with shelves climbing past the reach of the gray light from the hall until they lost themselves in the dark overhead. Books, and not just books, rolled things in boxes, and a long table under a sheet, and instruments of brass on the green of old pennies. And on the far wall, in a frame of black wood carved all over with leaves and eyes and letters Harry did not know, was a painting of a woman. She was looking at him. Harry knew about paintings looking at you. There was a print in the front room at Privet Drive, a galleon on a stormy sea, and Aunt Petunia liked to say the ship followed you round the room, and it did, in the way that a thing painted facing forward will always seem to face you. That was a trick of paint. This was not that. The woman in the frame turned her head. She was perhaps as old as Aunt Marge, but had none of Aunt Marge in her. She wore robes of a blue so deep it was nearly the color of the windows that held the light and gave none back, and her dark hair was bound up off a high forehead, and around it sat a thin circlet of something that was not quite gold. Her face was long and clever and not kind exactly, but interested, ferociously interested, the way Harry was interested, and he had never in his life seen that look on a grown-up's face pointed at him. "Well," she said, "you have coal on your teeth and you walked in my own footprints to spare the dust, which means you are either a thief raised carefully or a child raised carelessly. The footprints, by the way, are not mine. I have not had feet in a very long time. They belong to the other one who comes and stands at the wall and weeps at it and lacks the wit to do what you did, which was simply to ask the door to be a door." She tilted her head. "What is your name, Harry?" said Harry. "Harry," she repeated and turned the word over, examining it, plainly finding it wanting. "Harry what, Potter?" Something moved behind her painted eyes. It was very quick and very controlled, the look of a person who has been handed a piece of news and has decided in the half-second available to set it down gently and not let you see how heavy it was. Harry caught it because Harry watched faces the way other children watch television, constantly and for survival. "You know my name," he said. "It was not a question. I know a great many names," said the woman. "Names are cheap. Most of them are wasted on the people wearing them." She did not say which sort his was. "Tell me, Harry Potter, the door, when you put your hand to the wall, what did you feel?" He thought about lying because lying was usually safest and decided against it because she had already caught him doing the thing with the footprints, and lying to someone who reads you is worse than telling the truth. "Warm," he said. "Like something asleep, and I knew where to push, not like guessing, like remembering something I never knew." The woman went very still in her frame. "Say that again," she said, "the last part exactly as you said it, like remembering something I never knew." For a long moment she did not speak, and the only sound was the cold sound the room made, the violin smell sound of old paper breathing. Then she laughed once short, and it was not a kind laugh, but it was a real one, and Harry felt the same way he felt the rare times he got an answer right before the teacher had finished the question. "Do you know," she said, "what a riddle is, Harry Potter? It's a question that hides the answer inside itself." Her painted eyebrows climbed. "Who told you that?" "Nobody. It's just true. The riddle on the back of the cereal box. What has a face and two hands but no arms? The answer's in it. A face and hands is a clock. You just have to stop letting the words be about a person." He shrugged, suddenly aware he might have said too much, that the thing he did with words was a thing grown-ups found either funny or annoying and never useful. "It's not hard. Spoken," said the woman, "like a person for whom it is not hard and who has therefore never once been thanked for it." She looked at him in a new way then, a way Harry would not have words for until much later, the way a person looks at a thing they have been waiting for so long that they had stopped believing it would come and had to learn to live in the not coming. "I am going to ask you a riddle. The answer is hidden inside it, as you say. You will not have heard it before. It is older than the cereal box, older than the box's grandfather's grandfather. If you answer it, I will tell you what I am and what this room is and a number of things that no living person now knows. If you cannot answer it, you will go home and you will tell no one of this house and you will not come back, and I will go back to sleep and wait for someone better, though I have waited 1,000 years and I am beginning to suspect there is no one better, only later." She paused. "Do you accept the terms?" Harry thought about the terms. He thought about the part where the prize was knowing things no living person knew, and the part where the cost of losing was going back to a cupboard under the stairs and pretending this afternoon had not happened, which was a cost he paid most days already and could afford. The arithmetic was not difficult. "Yes," he said, "then attend." She drew herself up, and the room seemed to draw up with her, the shelves leaning in, the cold sharpening to a point. When she spoke, her voice had changed. It had the cadence of something spoken so many times it had worn a groove in the world. "I am taken from a mine and shut up in a wooden case from which I am never released, and yet I am used by almost every person. What am I?" Harry almost laughed and stopped himself, because laughing at a 1,000-year-old riddle felt like the kind of thing that ended badly in the stories where children met things in old houses. But it was hard not to, because he knew this one. He knew this one because Mr. Palkus, Piers's father, was a builder, and once, 2 summers ago, before Harry had understood that being seen with him was something Piers got hit for at home, Piers had shown Harry the inside of his dad's van, and the van had been full of these. "Pencil lead," Harry said. "Graphite. It comes out of a mine and they put it in a wooden case, a pencil, and they never take it out. You just sharpen the wood away, and nearly everyone uses a pencil." He looked up at her. "But that's not really old. Pencils aren't 1,000 years old." The woman's stillness had become a different kind of stillness. "No," she said quietly, "they are not. The riddle is older than the answer. I composed it for graphite 800 years before any man thought to sheathe it in cedar, and the answer was lead, plain dull lead from the mines of the north, which we shut in cases of iron for the writing of certain inks. The riddle waited for its better answer for 8 centuries. As it seems did I," she regarded him. "You did not merely solve it, you corrected it. You told me my own riddle had found a truer answer than the one I gave it. Do you understand how rare it is, child, to be improved upon by an infant with coal in his teeth?" "I'm not an infant," said Harry with dignity. "I'm 7. "You are an infant," said the woman, "and you are also, I begin to think, the thing I have been kept awake against the death of the world to find." She said it plainly, without warmth, as she said everything, and somehow that made it land harder than if she had been kind. Sit down, Harry Potter. The floor will do. There is no chair that has not gone to worm. Sit down, and I will keep my half of the bargain, though I warn you that knowing things has a price the cereal box never mentions, and the price is that you can never again be a person who does not know them. Harry sat on the floor, cross-legged, in the cold of a room that did not exist inside a house that held the light and gave none back, and looked up at a painting that was watching him think and felt, and this was the word he would have used if anyone had asked him, which no one ever did. He felt chosen, which was a thing that had never once happened to him, and which he did not yet know enough to be afraid of. "All right," he said, "tell me what you are." "What I am," she said, "is a great deal more difficult to say than what I was, so I shall do the easy part first, and you will have to be patient about the hard part, a quality I do not expect you possess and will be obliged to install in you by force." She settled in her frame, the deep blue robes shifting with a faint sound that should not have carried from inside a painting, and did. 1,000 years ago, give or take the years it took for the counting of years to settle down, there were 4 of us. We built a school in the north in a country that was not yet entirely a country. We built it because the children like you were dying. "Dying," Harry repeated. "Dying," she said, and did not soften it. Children who could do what you can do, who could put a hand to a wall and feel the warmth of a thing asleep, were born in those years to people who could not, and the people who could not were frightened, and frightened people do what frightened people have always done. They drowned them. They burned them. They walled them up. A gift that no one teaches you to use is not a gift. It is a fire in a house full of straw, and the child holding it burns first. So the 4 of us went out across that broken country, and we gathered the children who had not yet burned, and we brought them to a castle, and we taught them. That was the whole of it in the beginning. We taught them so they would not die." She paused. "The rest, the houses, the banners, the squabbling, the 1,000-year game of who was right about which child to admit, the rest came later, and the rest is what they remember, and the rest is rubbish." Harry was leaning forward now without having decided to. "What were you called, the 4 of you?" "Ah," she said, "now we come to it." She lifted her chin, and the not-quite-gold circlet caught a light that had no source in that lightless room. "They called me Rowena. Rowena of the Raven's Claw, for a banner I never chose and grew in the end almost fond of. There was a Godric, who was brave to the point of stupidity and kind to the point of danger. There was a Helga, who was worth the other 3 of us put together, and is the only one of us the world remembers correctly. And there was Salazar, who was my friend, and who was right about more than the world will admit and wrong about the one thing that mattered, and we do not this afternoon have the years it would take to discuss him properly. The names dropped into the cold room one after another like stones into the deep pond light of the windows. Harry knew them. Of course he knew them, though he could not have said how, the way you know the names in a half-remembered song, as he had known where to push the wall. They were under the surface of him, those names, and they had been there, he understood now, before he had ever walked into this house, waiting like the warmth under the oak. "You're Rowena Ravenclaw," he said. "I am the thing that is left of her," said Rowena Ravenclaw, and for one moment the dryness in her voice cracked, very slightly, the way ice cracks when it is still far too thick to fall through. "Which is the hard part, and I told you it would be, and I see by your face that you are not going to let me put it off, which is precisely the quality that condemns you to learn from me, so let us be done with it. I am not a ghost. Ghosts are imprints, smudges of the dead pressed into the air, repeating themselves with less of their wits each year. My daughter is a ghost. We will not speak of her today. And I am not what they make now and hang upon the walls of the castle, those chattering portraits that know a few hundred phrases and a person's favorite color and call it a soul. Those are puppets, clever puppets. I made the art that makes them, and I am ashamed of how it has been used, the way a woman who invented fire might be ashamed to find the world using it only to light cigarettes. Then what are you?" "I am a mind," said Rowena, "a whole one. Bound near the end of my life by an art that took me 40 years to build, and that no living wizard could now reproduce or even properly believe, into a vessel that would not rot, not flesh which fails and not stone which forgets, but a made thing, a painted thing, anchored and warded and woken only by a hand that carries the old blood and the old hunger both. I put everything I was into it, every argument I ever won and the 3 I lost. Every error I was too proud to admit while I breathed. I did it because I had learned too late to use it, the most important thing I ever learned, which is that knowledge does not survive in books." She let that sit. "Books are corpses of knowledge, child. They hold the shape of it the way a fossil holds the shape of the fish. Fossil cannot swim, and a book cannot think, cannot answer the question you did not know to ask, cannot look at a frightened 7-year-old with coal in his teeth and decide he is worth the only thing it has left, which is time. I did not want to be a fossil, so I made myself a teacher who would not die, and then I waited for a student worth teaching." She looked down at him, and the ferocious interest in her painted face had gone quiet and steady, like a lamp turned low so it would burn longer. "I have had a long time to consider whether the waiting was a mistake. You may take it as the highest compliment I am capable of paying that, sitting here looking at you, I have not yet decided that it was." Harry sat in the cold and the dust and did not say anything for a while, because there did not seem to be anything to say that would not be smaller than the silence. Then, because he was 7, and because the largest things in a child's mind are always pressed up against the smallest, he asked the question that was actually bothering him. "The other one," he said, "the footprints, who comes and cries at the wall and can't get in." Rowena's expression closed like a book. "That," she said, "is the second most important thing I am going to teach you, and I am going to teach it to you first because you will need it before you need anything else, before the magic, before the runes, before any of it." "Lean close," Harry laned. "There are people in this world, Harry Potter, who want what is in this room. Not the books, they could not read the books, not me. They would not know what to do with me, or worse, they would. They want the thing of it, the lost art. The deep magic that the modern world has mislaid the way a rich man mislays a key to a house he has forgotten he owns. Some of them want it because they are frightened, as your aunt is frightened, and a frightened person who gets his hands on power does not become less frightened, only more dangerous. And some of them want it because they have looked at the long dark and decided they would rather rule it than die into it. And those ones I fear, child, and I have been alive and then not alive for 1,000 years, and there is very little left that I fear. And the crying one, said Rowena, is neither yet but is being shaped into one or the other by people who are. She's the last of the line that kept me hidden, and she is grieving, and grief is the softest clay there is. Stay away from her until I tell you otherwise. Tell no one of this house, as you agreed, and come back tomorrow if you can manage it without being missed, and the day after, and the day after that, and we will begin, because we have 1,000 years to cover, and you have, by my estimate, perhaps 4 before the world notices you and the quiet ends." She paused. "Can you come back tomorrow?" Harry thought about the chores and the cupboard and the careful arithmetic of his days, the gaps he could open in them as he opened gaps in Dudley's gang at the corners. "Yes," he said. "Good. Then take one thing with you so that tonight, lying in whatever they have given you to sleep in, you do not persuade yourself you dreamed me. Children are very good at deciding that the impossible was a dream. It is how they survive their childhoods, and I would rather you did not survive yours that way." She inclined her head toward the black wood of her frame, toward the carvings that ran around it, the leaves and the eyes and the letters in no alphabet Harry knew. "There, the lowest mark on the left side where the frame meets the wall, it is a rune, the eldest sort, older than the runes your scholars catalog, older than the word rune. Put your finger to it, do not press, pressing is for walls, this you ask." Harry crossed the cold floor and found the mark, a thing like a struck match crossed twice, cut deep into the black wood and worn shiny at its center by other fingers across other centuries. He set his fingertip in the worn place. "Now," said Rowena, and her voice had gone low, and even the voice of someone laying a hand over yours to steady it, "do not try to do anything. That is the great mistake of your age and of mine. Everyone wants to do. Be still instead. Ask the mark what it is for, the way you ask the wall to be a door, not in words. Words are for me. The mark does not speak English. It was cut before England." Harry held his finger to the wood and was still, which was a thing he was unexpectedly good at, having spent years being still so the larger people in his life would forget he was in the room. He let the question be a shape rather than a sentence, "What are you for?" and pushed it down his arm into his fingertip the way you push your attention into a sore tooth to find exactly where it hurts. The mark answered. It did not glow or hum or do any of the things the front room galleon would have done in a story. It did something stranger and quieter and very much larger. For the space of a single breath Harry understood what the rune was for, completely, the way you understand a face is angry before you have counted a single feature of it. It was for holding. It was a knot tied in the world to keep a thing where it had been put, to keep the warmth from leaking out of the sleeping thing, to keep the room from being found, to keep a mind anchored to a painted vessel for 1,000 years against the slow tide that pulls all things apart. He felt the whole weight of that holding for one instant, felt how vast it was and how patient, a single small mark doing the work of a mountain laid across a door, and he felt underneath it, going down and down past anything he had a floor for, that this was the smallest and simplest of such marks, that there were others, that the whole house and the woman in it were a cathedral of them. And he had just put his finger on the one carved nearest the ground because it was the only one a beginner could touch without being undone. He took his hand away. His finger was cold to the knuckle as though he had held it in snow, and the rest of him had gone very quiet inside. "Oh," Harry said, "it was all he had." "Yes," said Rowena Ravenclaw, and there was something in her painted face that was almost gentle and would have denied being anything of the sort. "Oh, that is the correct first word. Anyone who has a longer one ready has not understood. You felt one knot, the meanest in the house, and it nearly emptied you. Remember that feeling when you are older and someone tells you that magic is the waving of a stick and the saying of a word. They will tell you that, they believe it. They are standing in a cathedral telling you it is a tent." She drew back into the depth of her frame. "Now you cannot tell yourself you dreamed it. Your finger will be cold until you sleep." "Go," she said, because he had not moved, "before you are missed and they come looking, because they must never come looking here. Put the wall back as you found it. Simply ask it. It knows you now. And Harry." He had got to his feet and he turned back. The lampglow light in her painted eyes had not changed, but her voice had very slightly into something he would not have a name for until he was much older and had felt it himself. Wash the coal off your teeth. A mind is a precious thing, and it is housed in a body, and a person who lets the housing go to ruin is telling the world he does not value the tenant. We begin tomorrow with the housing because it is the only lesson today you are too young to argue with. Now go. Harry went. He put his hand to the doorway and asked the wall, silently, the way you'd ask a favor of someone you respected, to be a wall again, and it was, with no movement his eye could catch. He walked back down the rising and falling tide of the black and white tiles, in his own prints this time, because there was no longer any reason to hide that he had been there from the one person who already knew. He climbed back down to the cellar and up the coal chute, which was harder going up than down and left him gray to the elbows, and he heaved the iron cover back into its crooked place. When he came out through the gap in the railings, the ordinary world was waiting for him exactly where he had left it. The lawnmower had stopped, the radio was playing a song about the summertime. The plane's white scratch had spread and softened into nothing. It was, his stomach told him, getting on for tea time, which meant there was a window, narrow but real, in which he could be back through the second-best gap in the back fence of Privet Drive before Aunt Petunia's voice climbed into the register it used, when his absence became a thing she could complain about to Uncle Vernon. He ran the whole way, and for once he was not running from anything. That night, kneeling on the cold lino of the bathroom with the door locked and the tap running thin so it would not be heard, Harry scrubbed the coal off his teeth with a brush gone splayed and gray, and he looked at himself in the spotted mirror, the green eyes, the hair that did what it wanted, the thin face that always looked a little surprised, and he thought about the woman in the deep blue who had been 4 people once, in a broken country, gathering children before they could burn. A whole mind, she had said. I did not want to be a fossil. He thought about the warmth under the oak, the warmth of a thing asleep, and how his hand had known where to push, like remembering something he never knew. He thought about the words she had not finished. I know a great many names. Most of them are wasted on the people wearing them, and how she had looked at his name, Potter, and set it down gently so he would not see how heavy it was. He did not understand most of it. He understood with the clean total certainty of a child who has spent his whole life understanding things nobody bothered to explain, that something had begun and that it was his, and that for once in his life he was not going to share it, or lose it, or have it taken away. Tomorrow, he told his reflection, very quietly, so the house would not hear. Then he turned off the tap and put the splayed brush back exactly where it had been, because a person who left things exactly where they had been was a person no one thought to look at twice, and Harry had 4 years of being thought about twice to make up for, and 1,000 years of a dead woman's mind to learn, and he meant to start at first light. Chapter 1 and Chapter 2. The first lesson is that you know nothing. Harry's finger was still cold when he woke. He lay in the dark of the cupboard under the stairs with his hand held up in front of his face where he could not see it, and he pressed the cold fingertip against his thumb, and it was true. He had not dreamed her. The cold was the receipt. Above him the house began its morning. The boiler clanked. Uncle Vernon's feet crossed the landing in the particular heavy way that meant he was rehearsing a complaint to make at breakfast. Dudley's door banged. Water ran. Harry lay still through all of it, working the problem as he worked every problem, which was to take it apart until it stopped being a feeling and became a list. The problem was time. He had perhaps an hour in the early morning before Aunt Petunia decided the garden needed weeding, or the car needed washing, or the windows needed doing. He had the long slack of the afternoon, when Dudley was at Piers's and Aunt Petunia was at her programs. He had whatever he could steal from the gaps in between, the gaps he was good at finding. Against this he had to set the walk to Old Mill Lane, which was 11 minutes if he went the back way along the alley with the paving slabs and did not meet anyone who wanted to hit him. 11 minutes there, 11 back. That left 40 minutes of the morning hour with the woman in the deep blue, and 40 minutes, Harry understood, was nothing at all, was a teaspoon dipped into the sea she had offered him. He would have to be efficient. He liked the word. He had read it on a packet of dishwasher tablets and looked it up. He did the morning chores faster and better than he had ever done them, because a job done badly got you a second job done over, and a second job was time he could not afford. He weeded the bed under the front window in 19 minutes flat, leaving the soil so neat that Aunt Petunia came out to inspect it twice and could find nothing to say, which put a crease between her eyebrows that he was learning to read as the look of a person whose machine has done something the manual did not warn her about. Then he asked, in the flat, quiet voice he used for asking things, whether he could go and play in the park. Don't come back filthy, she said, which was not yes but was not no, and Harry had learned that not no was the only kind of yes he was going to get. He was through the gap in the railings at Old Mill Lane by 9:30. The garden had not changed. The roses had not bloomed overnight into something kinder. The bird bath still wore its wig of moss, but the house knew him now. He felt it the moment he came up the buried path, a difference like the difference between a stranger's house and a friend's, where the very door seems to lean toward you. The drowned plum door was still locked because it was the kind of door that was locked, but Harry no longer needed it. He went round to the coal hole, and this time he did not slide down into the dark. This time, when he set his hand to the iron cover and asked, the long bolt of the back scullery door 3 feet away drew itself back with a sound like a person clearing his throat, and the scullery door swung in. Harry stood looking at it. "You let me in the easy way," he said to the house, or to the woman through the house, he was not sure which. "Yesterday you made me go down the coal chute." When he came at last through the hall and asked the paneling to be a door and stepped into the cold, tall study, Rowena Ravenclaw was waiting in her frame as though she had not moved all night, which he supposed she had not. "Yesterday," she said, "I made you go down the coal chute because I wished to know whether you would. A child who will not get dirty to reach a thing does not want the thing, he wants to be seen wanting it. You went down the chute. Today you may use the door, having earned it. This is the whole of how you will learn anything from me, so attend to it. I will make you do hard and undignified things, and the reward for doing them will be that I stop making you." She looked him over. "Your teeth are clean. Good. Sit. I am given to understand by the position of the sun across your filthy window, a little under 40 minutes, and I intend to spend the first 10 of them establishing how little you know, because a vessel that believes itself full cannot be filled." Harry sat on the floor. "I know I don't know anything," he said. "That's why I came back." "No," said Rowena, "you believe you know nothing, which is a different and more dangerous condition because it feels like humility and is in fact a kind of laziness. You know a great deal. You know how to make yourself unseen in a hostile house. You know how to read a face before it has finished arranging itself. You know that stories told by frightened children disagree on the details and stories told by witnesses agree on the dull parts. Yesterday you corrected a riddle 800 years older than your country. These are not nothings, Harry Potter. They are the beginnings of every art I am going to teach you, and if you go about telling yourself you know nothing, you will fail to notice that you have already begun. False modesty is a wall you build between yourself and your own mind. I will not have it in my study. Now." She settled. "Tell me the year." 1987. The number went into the cold room and did something to her face that Harry could not entirely follow. She had the look of a person doing a sum she already knew the answer to and hating the answer. 1987, Rowena repeated. "By the reckoning that counts from the carpenter's son, so, near enough 1,000 years since I drew breath, and the precise span need not concern us. What concerns us is what 1,000 years has done." Leaned forward in the frame, and the carved eyes around it seemed to lean with her. "The school, does it stand?" "I don't know about a school," Harry said honestly. "I don't know anything about magic. Until yesterday I thought I was just unlucky in a way that made strange things happen. Things move when I'm frightened. A teacher's wig went blue once. I made the glass go away at the zoo, I think, but I'm not sure, and anyway it was Dudley who fell in." He stopped. "Nobody told me there was a school." For a long moment Rowena said nothing. The cold of the room seemed to deepen by a degree. "They did not tell you," she said. "Of course they did not. You are 7, they will tell you at 11 when it is the convenient age, when you are old enough to be useful and young enough to be shaped. There is a system, there is always a system." Her voice had gone flat and precise, which Harry was beginning to understand was the sound she made when she was furthest from calm. A child with a gift, raised among people who fear it, alone, untaught, told nothing, left to discover his own power by accident in moments of terror. That is exactly the child we built the school to save, 1,000 years ago in a country where they drowned such children. And the school still stands, you tell me, and it let you grow up in a cupboard. She had not been told about the cupboard. He had not said cupboard. She watched him understand that she had read it off him, off how he sat, off some accumulation of small evidence, and she did not apologize for it. "Yes, I know where you sleep. I knew within a minute of meeting you. We will not discuss it. Discussing it would feed it. We will instead make you so formidable that where you sleep becomes, in time, your own choice and no one else's. That is the only revenge worth the having. The rest is noise." Harry discovered that his eyes had gone hot and that this was unacceptable, and he looked very hard at a brass instrument on the green of old pennies until the heat went away. "Good," said Rowena, who had seen, and who had looked away to let him manage it, which was a courtesy he would only recognize as a courtesy much later. "Now, the lesson. You said a word, magic. I want you to forget it. Not because it is wrong, but because it is a word like a sheet thrown over a horse. It tells you there is something underneath of roughly that size and shape and nothing more. People say magic and feel they have understood. They have understood nothing, so." She lifted one painted hand, and on the wall behind her, where there had been only dim shelves, a single point of light appeared, small and steady, the color of the not quite gold in her circlet. "What did I just do?" "Made a light." Harry looked at it. "I don't know." "There," said Rowena. "That is the most honest thing you have said all morning, and I want you to notice how much better it feels than telling me you know nothing. I do not know how is the doorway. I know nothing is the wall. Through the doorway, then, I will tell you how, and you will find that the how is not a trick and not a recipe, but a thing about the shape of the world." The light hung between them, patient. "There are those today, most of them, very nearly all of them, who would tell you that I made this light by waving a wand and saying a word. Lumos, they would say, and a stick would glow, and they would believe they had done something, the way a person who flicks a switch believes he has made electricity. He has not made electricity. He has permitted it. The wand is a switch, Harry. A marvelous switch, I will grant. The wand is the single cleverest thing the modern world has built, and it is also the thing that has cost them everything I am about to give you, because a person who has a switch stops asking where the light comes from. Where does the light come from? From me, said Rowena. From the part of a mind that is not the thinking part. You think with words, everyone does. Words are how a mind talks to itself. But under the words there is something older, the thing that knew the wall was a door before you had a sentence for it, the thing that felt the warmth of me asleep. Call it the undermind. It does not speak. It wants and it knows and it shapes and it has no patience for words at all. Magic, the thing under the sheet, is what happens when the undermind reaches out in the world, for reasons we spent 400 years arguing about and never settled, reaches back. The whole of every art I will teach you is a method for getting your thinking mind out of the way so your undermind can do what it already knows how to do. The wand end word is one such method. It is a good method. It is also the laziest and the shallowest, and because it works well enough for lighting cigarettes, the world has forgotten there was ever a cathedral and lives in the tent and calls the tent the whole of the sky. Harry was leaning forward again. He had stopped noticing the cold. So you don't need a wand. I never held one, said Rowena Ravenclaw, in a tone that managed to look down on the entire trade of wand makers and to be quietly fond of one of them at the same time. None of the four of us did in the beginning. The wand came later from the wand makers, and it was a great gift to the mediocre, and I do not despise it as much as I am pretending to, because Helga used one in her last years when her hands grew unsteady, and it let her keep healing, and anything that let Helga keep healing was good. But you, Harry, do not yet have a wand and will not have one for years, and so you are in the luckiest position a student of mine could possibly be in. You are obliged to learn the deep way because the shallow way is closed to you. Most children get the switch at 11 and never learn the wiring. You will learn the wiring first. By the time someone hands you a switch, you will know precisely what it does, and that will make you very dangerous in the way I mean it, which is the way a surgeon is dangerous and a butcher is not. She let the light wink out. Before you make one of your own, she said, I am going to test a different thing, because the undermind is built upon the thinking mind the way a roof is built upon walls, and your walls must be sound. I am going to say to you 7 words once, and you will not write them down because you have nothing to write with, and because writing is how a lazy mind avoids remembering. You will hold them ready. She did not wait for him to be ready. Iron, salt, the number 9, a heron, the word between, the color of a bruise 4 days old, your mother's eyes. She paused. Give them back to me, in order, backward. Harry blinked. Then he did it because she had asked for backward, and backward was harder, and harder was the point. My mother's eyes, the color of a bruise 4 days old, which is sort of yellow-green, the word between, a heron, the number 9, salt, iron. He stopped. You don't know what color my mother's eyes were. No, said Rowena. But you do, though you have, I would wager, no memory of her face at all. You have a single fact kept like a coin sewn into a coat, and you produced it without a flicker, which tells me you keep your true things deep and your daily things shallow, which is precisely the architecture I would build if I were building you, and which means someone somewhere built it well, or you built it yourself out of necessity, and either way it is sound. Most minds are a single drawer with everything thrown in. Yours has rooms already. We are going to furnish them. She tilted her head. Green, then, green, said Harry, like mine. Then we will not speak of it again until you raise it, which you will do exactly when you are ready and not one day before. Now make me a light. Harry closed his eyes. He looked for the place behind his eyes. At first there was only the inside of his own head, the dark and the leftover green shapes the brass instrument had burned there, and his own voice going, am I doing it? Is this it? What if I can't? Which he recognized, now that she had named it, as the thinking mind shoving in. He let that voice keep talking and stopped listening to it, as he had learned to stop listening to Uncle Vernon, and underneath the voice, when it had run on for a while into nothing, there was a quiet. And in the quiet there was the wanting, exactly where she had said it would be, a steady small pressure he had felt his whole life and never once been told how to use. He wanted a light, not a bright one, just a light, the way you want the sun to come out, which is not a plan but a leaning. Something happened against his closed eyelids, a warmth and a redness, and Rowena said very quietly, open your eyes and do not be startled, because being startled will end it. He opened his eyes. A light hung in front of him, the size of a marble, the color of a candle, and it was his. He could feel the line between it and the wanting place behind his eyes, taut and humming, and it was the strangest and most wholly satisfying feeling he had ever had, better than the alley with the paving slabs, better than correcting the riddle, because the riddle had been a thing he was already good at, and this was a thing he had not known he could be good at, a new country with his own flag in it. It guttered. It's going, he said, in the saying of it the words made it go faster, and he understood why she had told him not to be startled, and he tried to stop the words and could not, and the light shrank to a point and a spark and a memory of a spark and was gone. Harry let out a breath he had been holding without deciding to hold it. 40 seconds, said Rowena, possibly 45. I will be generous and say 45 because it is your first, and because the average 11-year-old handed a wand and the word, requires 3 lessons to manage a steady glow, and feels enormously pleased with himself when he does, and you have just done the thing the wand exists to spare them, with nothing but your own attention at the age of 7, having been told how to do it precisely once. She regarded him, and the lampglow light was back in her painted eyes. It is the single most promising thing I have seen in 1,000 years, and I am not going to tell you so, because praise at this stage produces a child who performs for praise, and I require a child who works for the work. So I will tell you instead that it guttered because you got frightened of losing it, and the fear was a word, and the word called your thinking mind back into the room, and your thinking mind, like all thinking minds, immediately took hold of the light to examine it, and in taking hold of it crushed it. The undermind makes, the thinking mind grips. You must learn to make with one and let the other watch without touching. That is the labor of the next several years, and you have just had your first taste of how hard it is, and I see by your face that you are not discouraged, that you came up out of it grinning like something half-wild, which is the rarest and most valuable thing about you, and which I will also not tell you. You just told me twice, Harry pointed out. Rowena Ravenclaw looked at him for a moment. Go home, she said. You are over your 40 minutes, and the woman with the crease between her eyebrows will be wondering, and a wondering woman is a watched door, and we cannot afford a watched door. Come this afternoon if you can. Practice the light. 3 times, no more. The undermind tires like a muscle, and an exhausted muscle learns nothing but exhaustion. And Harry, he was at the doorway. What you felt just now, the new country, the flag, keep that to yourself, not because it is shameful. Because it is yours, and the world is full of people who collect other people's countries, and you have not yet learned to defend your borders. We start on that soon. Go. Went, and the light he had made stayed with him all the way home, a warmth in the wanting place that did not gutter, and he found that he was walking differently, though he could not have said how, and that the alley with the paving slabs seemed smaller than it had, and the back fence of Privet Drive, and the cupboard, all of it smaller, as though he had been carrying a lamp into rooms he had always thought were the whole house, and discovered they were only the hall. The second morning she did not let him make a light at all. Sit, she said, and do nothing, and do it well, which is harder than anything I have asked you yet. Yesterday I taught the housing in 1 sentence, and you obeyed it. Your teeth are clean and your collar is straight, and now I will teach the rest of it, because a mind that does deep work in a starved and exhausted body is a lamp burning the last of its oil, very bright for a very short while, and then dark. I will not have you bright and then dark. I require you slow and long. She studied him with the attention she gave to a difficult line of an old text. How much did you eat this morning? Harry considered lying and did not. Half a piece of toast. Dudley wanted the rest. Then we have a problem larger than the lessons, and I cannot solve it from inside a frame, and I will not insult you by pretending the answer is simply to ask them for more because you have asked and you have learned what asking costs. She was quiet a moment. Here is what I can give you, which is not food but is the next most useful thing. The body, asked correctly, will do a great deal on very little. The monks of 3 traditions I outlived knew this. They fasted for visions and got them, though the visions were mostly the body's complaints dressed up as angels. You will not fast for visions. You will learn to breathe, because the one thing a poor child has as much of as a rich one is air, and air, taken properly, is most of what the undermind runs on. Now put your hand flat on your belly, below the navel. When you breathe, that hand should rise and your shoulders should not move at all. Most people breathe high and shallow in the chest like a frightened animal, and a body that breathes like a frightened animal tells the undermind there is a lion in the room, and the undermind closes the cathedral and runs. Breathe low. Tell the lion there is no lion. He put his hand on his belly. He breathed. His shoulders went up. Again, said Rowena. Slower. You are not trying to fill yourself. You are trying to be filled. There is a difference, and it is the same difference as between the undermind and the thinking mind, and if you learn it in the breath, you will already half know it everywhere else. Count in for 4, hold for 4. Out for 6, always longer out than in, because the out breath is where the body unclenches. 4, 4, 6. Do it until I stop you, and do not perform it for me, because I will know. I have watched 10,000 children perform stillness, and not one of them fooled me, and not one of them imagined they had failed to. Harry breathed. 4, 4, 6. The cold room held very still around him. Somewhere far off in the ordinary world a dog was barking and then was not. The barking went away, and then the dog went away, and then the wanting that he was always doing, the low hum of be ready, be quick, be small, that wanting went quiet too, not gone but lying down. And for a stretch of time he could not measure. Harry sat on the floor of a room that did not exist and was, for once, not waiting for anything, not flinching from anything, not running. Simply a person breathing in a cold room with a 1,000-year-old mind keeping watch over him. And it was the closest thing to safe he had felt since before he could remember. There, said Rowena softly when she let him stop. Remember that the way you remembered your mother's eyes, you will need it more than the light. The light is a trick, that is a foundation. Hungry boys who learn to breathe like that have walked out of dungeons. Well-fed men who never learned it have died of a stubbed toe and a panic. Now go and eat whatever you can get, and do not tell anyone you were taught to breathe, because there is no faster way to be thought simple, and being thought simple for you is armor, and we do not throw away armor. The trouble when it came from Dudley, because trouble at Privet Drive was a weather system, and Dudley was the low pressure that set it spinning. It was the fourth afternoon. Harry had been to the Crow House every day. Twice on the day the Dursleys went to Aunt Marge's and left him with Mrs. Figg, because Mrs. Figg fell asleep in front of the racing at 2 o'clock as reliably as the boiler clanked at 7, and a sleeping minder was an open gate. He had learned to keep the light for 90 seconds. He had learned to make it move slowly across the dark of the study, which Rowena said was a different and harder thing, because movement was a want laid on top of a want, and most people could only hold one want at a time. He had learned that the carved eyes on her frame were the oldest writing in the house, and that he was not ready to be told what they said. And he had got careless about the time he came home, because the lamp in the wanting place made the days feel longer, and on the fourth afternoon he came through the gap in the back fence at 5:20 and walked straight into Dudley, who was sitting on the back step eating a Mr. Whippy and who had been, it turned out, sent to find him. "Where have you been?" Dudley said, not a question. Dudley did not ask questions, he issued them. "The park. You weren't in the park. Malcolm was in the park." Piers was in the park. Dudley licked the ice cream where it had run over his knuckles. "You've been somewhere, you go somewhere, you've gone somewhere every day." There was a slowness in how he said it that Harry did not like, because Dudley slow was Dudley working, and Dudley working was rare and therefore dangerous, the way a flood is more dangerous than rain. "I'm going to tell Mum you go somewhere." Harry stood very still and ran the next 10 minutes as he had run them on the curb on Magnolia Road, and saw at once that this was worse, because there was no gap to open. Dudley was not chasing him. Dudley was holding a thing, a piece of knowledge, and the thing Harry had spent his whole short life learning was that the only currency that bought anything in this house was the absence of attention, and Dudley was about to spend Harry's entire savings of it in one sentence to Aunt Petunia. He goes somewhere. And then there would be questions and a following and a watched door and the end of everything. He thought about the light. He thought about Rowena saying the undermined wants and knows and shapes. He thought with a clarity that put a cold weight in his stomach, that he could probably make Dudley's ice cream do something, fall or freeze his hand or worse, and that he wanted to badly in the old hot way, and that this was exactly how he had made the teacher's wig go blue and the glass disappear at the zoo, the undermined reaching out in a moment of fear, and that if he did it now Dudley would scream and Aunt Petunia would come, and there would be a thing that could not be unseen, a strange thing. And the strange things were the one subject in this house more dangerous than where he went in the afternoons. So he did not reach for the light. He reached for the other thing she had taught him, the first thing, the thing about reading a face before it finished arranging itself, and he read Dudley's and saw that Dudley did not actually care where Harry went. Dudley cared about the ice cream and about being bored and about the particular pleasure of holding something over someone. The threat was not information. It was a transaction. Dudley wanted to be paid not to tell. "If you tell," Harry said, "you'll have to say how you know, you'll have to say you've been spying on me, you'll have to say you sat on the step and waited like..." He hunted for the cruelest true thing, which was the most efficient currency he had, like you didn't have anyone to play with. The ice cream stopped halfway to Dudley's mouth. "And then Mum'll feel sorry for you," Harry went on, watching the face arrange and rearrange, "and being felt sorry for is worse than being told off. You said so. You said it about Malcolm when his Nan died and everyone was nice to him and he hated it. So you won't tell. You'll just want me to think you might, so I'm scared of you, which is fine. I'll be scared of you." He made his voice flat and small and gave Dudley the gift Dudley actually wanted, which was the appearance of fear, costing Harry nothing because it was counterfeit. "Okay, you win. Just don't make me explain it to your mum, because then we both lose." Dudley looked at him for a long moment with the laborious suspicion of a person who senses he has been handled but cannot find the handle. "You're weird," Dudley said at last, which was Dudley's word for any move he could not follow, and he heaved himself up off the step and went inside, and the threat went with him, diffused not by magic but by the older art, the one Rowena had taught first because he would need it before anything else. Harry stood in the garden with his pulse going hard in his throat and understood, with words around it for the first time, what she had meant. "We will make you so formidable that where you sleep becomes your own choice, not by power, by this, by seeing the board." He told her about it the next morning, the whole of it, because he found he wanted to, which was itself a new country. Rowena listened without interrupting, which she had not done before, and when he finished she was quiet for a moment. "You had a light in your hand," she said. "The hot kind, the old kind, the kind that broke the glass at the zoo. I felt it on you when you came in just now, the residue of nearly having reached for it. You wanted to use it on the fat one." "Yes, why didn't you?" "Because it would have been seen, and the strange things are the worst thing." And Harry stopped because the rest of it was harder to say, and because you can't take it back. The wig went blue, and then it was a thing that had happened, and everyone knew a strange thing had happened. Even if they didn't say magic, they knew, and it made it worse for ages. The reading his face thing, you can do that and nobody even knows you did anything. Yes, said Rowena Ravenclaw, and there was none of the dryness in it, just the flat, clean sound of a true thing being agreed with. The greatest magic leaves no mark that it was magic. Remember that against the day someone offers to teach you the loud kind and calls it strength. The loud kind is for people who could not learn the quiet kind. You have just chosen the quiet kind under pressure at 7 with the hot light right there in your hand begging to be used, and that, Harry, is the lesson I was most afraid you would fail, and I am going to break my own rule now and tell you plainly that you did not fail it because you should hear it said once by someone so that you know what it sounds like. She paused. Now do not let it go to your head, make the light. You owe me 90 seconds and I intend to collect 100. He did not know that week that he had already been noticed, though not by anyone who guessed the truth. Mrs. Fig kept cats and kept Harry, on the days the Dursleys could not be troubled to, and she kept, in a way Harry never thought to question, a great many opinions about a small number of subjects, the chief of which was the dullness of her own life. She had watched Harry Potter come and go from number 4 for 7 years the way you watch a clock, by not really watching at all. But a clock that has always read 1/2 suddenly reading 9 o'clock will catch the eye of even a sleepy watcher, and Harry had changed. He came back from his afternoons not scuffed and hunted but quiet, and a quiet Harry was new, and Mrs. Fig, dozing through the 2 o'clock racing with a tabby on her knees, found herself a little more awake than she had been. She did not know what she had seen. She knew only that the arrangement she had been part of for 7 years, the arrangement she did not fully understand and was paid in cat meal and a sense of importance not to ask about, had a rule under all its other rules, and the rule was, if anything about the child changes, you tell. And so on a Thursday Arbella Fig wrote a short and badly spelled letter, and gave it to an owl she kept in the spare room and pretended to her neighbors was an ornament, and the owl flew north. Harry knew none of this. He knew only that the light on the Friday held for 140 seconds, and that Rowena said adequate in the tone she used when she meant remarkable, and that the world, which had ignored him so thoroughly for 7 years that he had built his whole self out of being ignored, was beginning, very quietly, in a stone office hundreds of miles to the north, to turn its head. It was on the way home from the Friday's lesson that Harry first saw the woman in the lane. She was standing at the end of Old Mill Lane where it met the proper road, half behind the overgrown hedge, in a long gray coat that was too warm for June, and she was looking at the Crow House the way Harry imagined a person might look at a grave they could not afford to be seen visiting. She was young or youngish, with pale hair pulled back hard from a face that had been crying recently and was trying not to be caught at it. She had a thermos in one hand that she was not drinking from. She had the look of a person who had come to a place many times and never once been able to do the thing she came to do. The footprints, Harry thought, the narrow feet, the one who comes and weeps at the wall and lacks the wit to do what you did. He stopped on the wrong side of the hedge where she could not see him, and watched her watch the house, and his curiosity, which was the strongest force in his small body, stronger than caution, stronger nearly than hunger, pulled at him to go and speak to her because she was sad and she was connected to the secret, and Harry collected connections to the secret the way other boys collected football stickers. Stay away from her until I tell you otherwise. He stayed. It cost him something he did not have a name for. He watched the woman in the gray coat lift the thermos at last and not drink from it and lower it again, and then turn and walk away up the road with the careful walk of a person who has decided not to look back because looking back would finish them. And Harry watched her go and put the gray coat and the pale hair and the undrunk thermos away in the part of his mind that kept things, and went home the other way, and did not tell Rowena he had seen her, which was the first thing he kept from his teacher. And which he told himself was nothing, and knew, in the wanting place under the words, was not. That night he made the light in the dark of the cupboard, small and steady in the color of a candle, and held it for 110 seconds by the slow count of his own heart, and by its light he looked at the underside of the stairs 11 inches above his face, the cobwebs and the nail heads and the pencil line where someone years ago, some other small person perhaps, had marked a height and never grown past it, and he thought that the cupboard did not feel as small as it had a week ago. And that this was either because he had got used to it or because he had begun, very slightly, to grow. He let the light gutter on purpose to feel that he could choose it. Then he lay in the dark, which was only dark now and not the whole of the world, and he thought about the woman in the gray coat standing at a wall she could not open, weeping at a door that knew his name and not hers, and he thought in the way that 7-year-olds think large thoughts sideways, that there was something not right about it, something not fair, that the house had chosen him, who already had more than he had a week ago over her, who had come every day and brought a thermos and could not get in. He did not have the word for what he was feeling. Rowena would have told him the word and would have told him to be careful of it, because it was the word that had built half the good and all the worst things in the history of the world. The word was guilt, and Harry, who had been made to feel it for things that were not his fault every day of his life, did not recognize it when, for once, it arrived for a reason. Chapter 2 and Chapter 3, wards, and the things they keep out. By the middle of August the lessons had a shape, and the shape was this. Harry learned faster than Rowena could pretend not to be impressed by, and Rowena, denied the pleasure of being impressed, took her revenge by making each new thing harder than the last. She had stopped letting him make the light at all. "You can make light," she said. "A toddler with a candle can make light. We do not return to a thing once it is owned, we use the thing to reach the next thing. Light was never the lesson. Attention was the lesson, and now you have a little of it, and we will spend it." She had him hold the breath and the wanting at once, which was holding 2 ropes in one hand, and then she had him do it with his eyes open in a room she made colder on purpose, because the world will not arrange itself comfortably for you when you need this, and you may as well learn it in discomfort where it lives. He shivered and held the ropes and did not drop them mostly, and on the days he dropped them she said nothing, which was worse than anything she could have said. She had begun in the gaps to teach him to look at a thing and take it apart with his eyes alone, the way a clockmaker sees a clock and not a face. She set him an apple core, a bent nail, a dead moth on the windowsill, and made him say aloud everything true about each one until he ran dry, and then made him find 10 more true things, because the first 10 are the 10 any fool sees, and the magic lives in the 11th. It was, she told him, the same discipline as the wanting and the breath, wearing a different coat. All of it is one thing, Harry. All of it is paying attention to what is actually in front of you instead of the story you were told to see. That is the whole secret. There is no other secret. The rest is practice. He had grown half an inch. He knew because the pencil line under the stairs, the one some other small person had drawn long ago, was now level with the top of his ear instead of the crown of his head, and he had started eating with a new kind of attention, the slow 4-4-6 attention, so that the small amounts he was given went further, as she had promised they would. Aunt Petunia, who measured everything, had not yet measured that the leftovers were lasting Harry better. She had noticed only that the garden had never looked so well, and had responded by finding more garden. On the morning the next discipline began, Rowena was already talking before he had finished asking the wall to be a door. "Today," she said, "I am going to tell you what this house is, because you are ready to be frightened by it correctly, and a person frightened correctly is safer than a person not frightened at all. Sit. No light, no breath, just your ears, which are the most underused organ a clever child owns." She waited until he had folded himself onto the floor. "What is a wall, Harry?" He had learned not to give the first answer. The first answer was always the one she was about to take apart. "A thing that keeps something on one side and something else on the other." "Good. You did not say bricks. A child who says bricks thinks a wall is a thing. You have understood that a wall is a decision, made solid, the decision that this shall be in and that shall be out. Now, a ward is the same decision, made without bricks. It is a wall built out of meaning instead of stone. And because it is built of meaning and not of stone, it can keep out things that stone cannot keep out, and let in things that stone would stop, and it can be told whom to know and whom to forget, and it does not weather and it does not fall unless the meaning that holds it up is allowed to rot." She let that settle into the cold. "This house, Harry, is not a house with a few wards in it. This house is a ward that has been persuaded to look like a house. Every brick is an argument. The damp under the tiles that lifts them into a tide is not damp. It is the seam where 2 old workings were stitched together by a hand less skilled than mine, and the stitch shows. The windows that hold the light and give none back, that you noticed on your first day and could not say why it troubled you, those are the oldest working in the place, and they do exactly what you saw them do. They keep what is inside from being seen by what is outside, down to the light itself, which is why no lamp burning in here has ever been seen from the lane in 400 years. Harry looked at the windows, the deep pond color of them, and felt the back of his neck go tight in the way it did when a thing he had filed away as ordinary turned out to have been watching him the whole time. 400 years, he said, but you're 1,000. I am, the house is not, I was not always here. Something passed over the painted face, quick, the same controlled setting down he had seen on the first day when he said his name. We will come to that. First, the craft, because the craft will keep you alive and the history will only make you sad, and I prefer my students alive and sad to dead and ignorant. Stand up, go to the seam, the lifted tiles, put your bare hand flat on the floor where the tide is highest, and do what you did to the rune on my frame, but do not be afraid of it. This one will not empty you, it is weak, it is the weakest thing in the house, which is precisely why I am letting you touch it. Ask it what it is for. Then ask it whether it is well. Harry went to the seam, where the black and white tiles rose in their frozen wave, and knelt and put his palm flat against the cold ceramic and was still and asked. The answer came slower than the runes had and muddier, the way a voice comes through a wall when you cannot make out the words but can hear the tone. Concealment, that was the for. The working at the seam was a small cousin of the great working in the windows. Keep the house unnoticed, keep the lane's eyes sliding off it, keep the council's maps vague about whether there was a building here at all. And then he asked the second question, "Are you well?" And the answer to that one arrived not as a word but as a sensation, a frayed and snagging feeling, like a jumper pulled at by a nail, like a rope with one strand gone and the others taking the strain and beginning, very slowly, to mind. He took his hand back. "It's torn," he said. "Not torn through, but it's pulling, something s pulling at it from outside." The study went very quiet. "Say something," Rowena said. "Be precise. Precision is the difference between a healer and a butcher. We have discussed this. Is it weather? Is it time? Both pull at a working and both pull stupidly, evenly, the way water wears a step. Or is it a hand?" Harry put his palm back down, and this time he did not ask a question. He only listened, as she had taught him to listen, to Dudley's face, and he felt the pulling again, and he felt that it was not even, was not stupid, came and went, probed and withdrew, came back a little to the left of where it had been. "A hand," he said. "Somebody's outside, feeling for the edges, not all the time, like they keep coming back to check." "How long," said Rowena, and her voice had gone to the flat and precise register, the furthest from calm register, "would you say this has been happening?" "I don't know, I only just learned to feel it, but the phrase not new. The strand that's gone, it's gone soft at the ends, it's old." He looked up at her. "Whoever it is, they've been at it a while, they're being careful, like me, like they don't want to be seen doing it." Rowena Ravenclaw looked down at the 7-year-old kneeling on her broken floor with his hand on a 400-year-old wound, and for a moment she said nothing, and the not-quite-gold circlet caught its sourceless light and held it. "Then we have less time than I thought," she said, "and I must teach you faster than is wise, and you must forgive me in advance for the bruises. Take your hand off it. You cannot mend it yet, and a clumsy touch will only widen the tear. Sit down. I am going to tell you the history after all, because the history has stopped being a thing that will only make you sad and started being a thing that will keep you alive, and those are the only histories worth a child's time. When I died," said Rowena, in the tone of a person reading a will, "I left behind 3 things, and the world has spent 1,000 years quarreling over all 3. The first was a diadem, which is a sort of crown, into which, in my pride, I had poured rather more of myself than was wise, because I believed that wisdom could be made into an object and worn. I was wrong, and I will tell you how wrong on a day when you're stronger, because the wrongness of it is one of the 2 threads that lead to the one you and I are going to have to be ready for. The diadem was stolen and lost, and is lost still, for all that I know, and good, and we will leave it. The second was a daughter. She was a ghost before I had been dead a year, by her own grief and her own choices, and she haunts the castle to this day and will not speak to the portraits, because the portraits remind her that her mother chose to become one, which she takes, not wrongly, as a kind of abandonment. We will not speak of her either, though for a different reason than the diadem. The diadem I leave because it is dangerous. Helen I leave because she is mine, and there are wounds a person does not display even to a worthy student, and you, who keep your mother's eyes sewn into your coat, will understand that without my having to spell it. The third thing I left was this." She did not gesture. She did not have to. The gesture was the whole room. "Myself, the working you sit inside. I did not make the me of it in the castle. I made it in the last years of my life, in secret, in a tower the others did not know I kept, and when it was finished and I had poured the whole of my mind into the paint the way I had once poured a fraction of it into the crown, I left instructions, and I died, and then I was here awake, which is a strange sentence to say and a stranger thing to be. The instructions were simple, and they were these, that I was never to be given to the school. You will want to know why. You are making the face you make when you want to know why and are too proud to interrupt. The why is the spine of everything, so attend. A school is an institution, and an institution is a thing that outlives the people who built it, and a thing that outlives its builders forgets, very quickly, why it was built, and remembers only that it exists and wishes to go on existing. I built a school to save children. Within a century it was a thing that sorted children and ranked them, and set them at each other's throats over a game of who belonged to which dead founder, and I watched this happen while I was still alive and could do nothing but argue, and losing those arguments is the reason I made the working at all. I did not want my whole mind, every art I had, every deep working the modern world has since mislaid, handed to an institution, because an institution does not learn, it acquires. It would have hung me on a wall and mined me, the way you mine a seam, taking the easy and the useful and the profitable and leaving the rest, and it would have called this preservation, and within 300 years there would have been a portrait of Rowena Ravenclaw in the headmaster's office that knew 400 phrases and a person's favorite color and called itself me, and the real me would have been used up and thrown out, and no one would have noticed the difference. Because no one left would have known there was a difference to notice. Harry was hugging his knees. "So who got you instead? A line of keepers, not wizards of great power. Great power attracts attention, and attention was the one thing I could not survive. Quiet families, hedge witches, herb wives, a squib or two who could not work magic at all but could be trusted to guard a thing precisely because no one suspected them of guarding anything. They moved me. Down the centuries, from hiding place to hiding place, always one step ahead of the people who came looking, and people always came looking because the legend would not die. The wisdom of Rowena, they called it, those who hunted it, the Ravenclaw Codex. They imagined a book mostly which suited me, let them dig through libraries. The clever ones imagine a portrait, and the cleverest of all imagine the truth, which is worse than a portrait, and those are the ones the keepers ran from. The last keeper, Harry said, and he was thinking of a gray coat and an undrunk thermos, and he kept his voice as flat as he could, put you here in the Crow House, in the middle of normal people where no wizard would think to look. In the middle of normal people, Rowena agreed, where no wizard would think to look. Cassius Thorne, a clever, frightened, decent man who built the concealment you just felt fraying, built it himself with more love than skill, which is why the seam shows. He is dead now. 3 years by the dust on the path before you started disturbing it. And the line, Harry, the line of keepers that has guarded me for 1,000 years. The line that moved me and hid me and ran with me through every century since the conquest. The line ends with a young woman who comes to my wall and weeps because she cannot open it. Because the working I built wakes only for a hand that carries the old blood and the old hunger both, and she has the blood, the thorn blood, the keeper's blood, but the hunger skipped her, the gift skipped her. She is as magical as that clock. And so the door her family died to guard will not open for her, and she has nothing left to guard but a wall, and she knows it. Rowena was quiet a moment. I told you to stay away from her. Do you remember why? Because she's grieving, and grief is the softest clay there is, and because someone's shaping her. Yes, the painted eyes settled on him. And have you stayed away from her, Harry? He had known the question was coming from the moment she began the history, and he had decided, somewhere in the telling, that he was not going to lie to the only person who had ever thought his mind was worth anything, even when the truth cost him. No, he said, I talked to her yesterday, I'm sorry. It had happened the way the important things in Harry's life always happened, which was that he made a plan and then his curiosity ate the plan. He had meant only to follow Hesper Thorne home, to learn where she lived, to add it to the part of his mind that kept things. He had told himself this was reconnaissance, a word he had also looked up, and that reconnaissance was not the same as talking, and that Rowena's rule was about talking. He had followed her at a careful distance, up the proper road and along by the allotments and down a terrace of pebble-dashed houses that had seen better decades, and he had been so pleased with how invisible he was being that he had walked straight into the trap a clever, frightened person sets for a tale, which is to go round a corner and stop. She was waiting on the other side of it with her back to the wall and a short dark stick already in her hand, held low, pointed at his middle, and her face was not crying now. It was doing the opposite of crying. It had gone to the hard blank readiness of a person who has been hunted and has decided to hunt back. Right, Hesper Thorne said. Who sent you? Nobody, said Harry, which was true, and put his hands up, which he had seen on the television, and which seemed to be the wrong move because her eyes narrowed. You're a child. Yes, you've been to the house, the Crow House. I've seen you 3 weeks, maybe 4. You go in and you come out, and you don't go in by any door I can see. The stick did not waver. Her voice had a flat northern edge to it, all the soft southern vowels filed off. I have watched that house every day for 3 years, and I cannot get in, and a scrap of a boy who isn't tall enough to reach the knocker walks in and out like he's going to the shop. So you'll tell me how, or I'll do something we'll both regret, and I'm out of practice and frightened, which makes me more dangerous, not less, so don't. Harry looked at her and did the thing Rowena had taught him first, the oldest art, and read the face, and what he read in it stopped him from doing any of the clever, frightened person things he might have done. He read that she was not going to hurt him. He read that the stick was a bluff, not because she wouldn't use it, but because she didn't know how, that she held it the way you hold a thing you have seen used but never used yourself, that the readiness in her face was a wall thrown up over something that had been crying an hour ago and would cry again tonight. He read under all of it the thing he knew best of anything in the world because he saw it in the spotted mirror every night, a person who had been left alone with a thing too big for them and told it was their job. You're Cassius Thorne's granddaughter, Harry said. The stick came up an inch. How do you know that name? The house told me, well, the thing in the house. She told me about the keepers. She told me about you. He kept his voice level as he kept it level for Dudley, except that this was not a trick. This was the truth offered as a gift, which he was discovering was a more dangerous thing to give away than any lie. She said the door won't open for you because the gift skipped you. She didn't say it to be cruel. She said it like it made her sad. I don't think she likes that it won't open for you. I think she'd open it if she could. Hesper Thorne stood with her back against the pebble dash and her grandfather's wand in her unpracticed hand, and something went out of her face, the hard readiness draining away and leaving behind the thing it had been built over, and she lowered the stick, not because she had decided to trust him, but because her arm had stopped being willing to hold it up. It talks to you, she said. Her voice had changed, after everything. After my granddad and back, after we gave up everything, gave up being anything to keep that thing safe, it opens for a muggle boy off the estate the first afternoon he wanders in, and it talks to him. I'm not a muggle, Harry said, because it seemed important to be accurate, and then because her face had done something terrible at the word, he added, more gently than he had ever said anything, but you nearly are, and that's not your fault, and she knows it's not your fault. She told me the blood S in you, the keeper's blood, the gift just didn't come with it this time. She said it like it was bad luck, she didn't say it like it was your fault. For a moment he thought she might cry after all, and he braced for it, because he did not know what to do with crying. No one had ever cried near Harry. Crying was a thing that happened on the other side of doors. But she did not cry. She laughed instead, one short ugly laugh with no fun in it, and slid down the wall until she was sitting on the cracked paving with her knees up, level with him, and looked at him with red-rimmed eyes that were taking his measure all over again. "Sit down," Hesper Thorne said. Before someone's neck curtain twitches and we're the talk of the terrace. Sit down and tell me your name and tell me what she's teaching you, because if that house has finally chosen someone, then God help you, because you've no idea what's coming for it, and somebody had better. So he sat on the cracked paving of a stranger's terrace, and he told her his name, and watched it land on her the way it had landed on Rowena, the controlled flinch of a person who knew the name from somewhere and was deciding fast not to say so. He noticed it. He did not ask. He had a growing collection of people setting his name down gently, and he had begun to understand that the collection itself was a fact about him, and that the fact was large, and that he was not ready to pick it up. "You knew it," he said instead. "My name. You did the thing the painting did." "Everybody our sort knows your name, love," said Hesper, and then shut her mouth on whatever came next hard, the way you shut a drawer you've decided not to open. "It's not my place. It's hers if it's anybody else, and if she hasn't told you, then she's got her reasons, and her reasons are usually better than mine." She rubbed her face with the heel of her hand, smearing the day's salt. "Forget I said anything. Tell me about the lessons. Tell me she's teaching you something useful and not just riddles, because riddles won't stop what's coming." And Harry, who had no one in the whole of the ordinary world he was allowed to tell, told her about the light in the breath and the seam in the floor, and Hesper Thorne listened with the wand lying forgotten across her knees. And somewhere in the middle of it, the suspicion went out of her and was replaced by something Harry recognized, because he felt it himself every morning on the walk to Old Mill Lane. Which was the specific, reluctant hope of a person who has been alone with a hopeless thing and has just heard a footstep that might be help. "And what," said Rowena, when he had finished telling her all of it, "every word is coming for it, did she say? Be exact." "A man." Harry sat very straight, giving the report as she had taught him to give reports, dull parts and all. She didn't know his real name for ages. It came to her after her granddad died, when she was at her worst, she said, when she'd have believed anything kind. He said he was a collector. He said he understood what her family had carried, that he respected it, that he only wanted to help her bear the burden, that the responsibility was too much for one person, and he had resources, safe places, people. He brought her flowers when her granddad died. He came to the funeral, and no one else came who knew what the funeral was really about. Harry paused. She believed him for nearly a year. She nearly told him where you were. She nearly took him to the wall. What stopped her? He got impatient. She said that was the thing that saved her. He'd been so patient, so kind for so long, and then one day she said she still couldn't open the door and didn't know how, and the kindness went off his face like a light going off all at once, and for just a second she saw the thing under it, and the thing under it wasn't a collector who wanted to help. It was someone who'd been waiting a year for a key and had just worked out the key was broken. Harry's hands had tightened on his knees. She ran. She's been hiding from him since. She found out his name from an old friend of her granddad's before the friend died, and she thinks the friend dying wasn't an accident. His name's Crail, Magnus Crail. The friend called him the antiquary. He said Crail's done this before. He finds old things, old hidden magic, and he doesn't preserve it. He takes it. He uses it up. He takes the thing apart to get the power out of it, the way you'd burn a piano to keep warm. The friend said there used to be other things like you. Other deep workings the keepers hid, and one by one over 30 years they've gone quiet, and every time one goes quiet, Crail is a little harder to kill. The study was silent. The cold of it had a different quality now, less like a room and more like the inside of a held breath. "A little harder to kill," Rowena repeated very softly. "Yes, that is the other thread. I told you the diadem was one, and I would give you the second when you were stronger. You are not stronger, you are 7, but I no longer have the luxury of waiting for stronger, so listen, and do not be too frightened to listen, which is a skill, and we will practice it now whether you are ready or not." She drew herself up in the frame. "There is an art, Harry. The deepest and the worst of all the arts the modern world has forgotten, and it is not forgotten by accident. It was buried on purpose by people who loved the world, and the burying of it is one of the few things the institution I distrust has ever done that I wholly approve of. It is the art of taking your own self, the thing I poured into this paint, the thing you felt when you touched the rune, and dividing it, splitting it. Anchoring a piece of yourself into a thing outside your body, so that while the thing endures, you cannot truly die, because there is always a piece of you left to crawl back to." She let it land. "I used a pale shadow of it, a clean and lawful corner of it, to make myself a teacher who would not die. Crail, if your Hesper has the truth of it, is using the black heart of it to make himself someone who will not die. And the difference between what I did and what he does is the difference between giving your life away and taking the lives of others to pad your own, and it is the only difference that has ever finally mattered in any age under any name. Harry sat with this. It was, he understood, the largest thing she had ever told him, and she had told it to him fast and rough, with the bruises she had warned him about, because the hand at the edge of the wards had taken away the time to do it gently. He wants you, Harry said, because if he takes you apart, he gets 1,000 years of magic all at once, and he gets the one art that could undo what he's done to himself, and maybe he gets the way to do it bigger. Yes, and Hesper can't protect you because she can't even get in. Yes, and I can get in, Harry said, but I'm 7. Yes, said Rowena Ravenclaw, and for the first time since he had met her she did not follow the bleak truth with a sharpening of it, did not turn it into a lesson, did not arm it. She only looked at him, 1,000 years old, painted into a corner of a dying house, with the one person in the world who could open her door sitting cross-legged on the floor in trousers that did not fit, and she said, in a voice he had not heard from her before, which is why we are going to stop being gentle, you and I today you mend the seam. Not because you are ready. Because there is no one else, and readiness is a luxury for children with time, and you, I am sorry to say, are not one of those, and never were, which is the thing I knew about you before you finished telling me your name. Far to the north, in a circular office at the top of a tower, an old man held a badly spelled letter up to the light of a window and read it for the 4th time. The letter said very little, and Albus Dumbledore had learned across a long life that the letters which said very little were the ones to read 4 times. Harry is changed, Arbella had written in her careful, laborious hand. Quiet now, goes off afternoons, comes back calm, not like him. Thought you want to know, that was all. A neighbor's note about a neighbor's child. He had received 100 like it over 7 years and burned 99 without a second reading. He did not burn this one. He set it down on the desk among the whirring silver instruments, several of which had been built over the decades to do one single quiet thing, which was to notice if a particular kind of very old magic ever woke anywhere in the south of England. They had been silent for 50 years. He had built them as a young man when he first heard the legend whole, from the lips of a keeper he had cornered and questioned with more charm than mercy, a frightened herbwife who had died still believing he meant her no harm, and perhaps he had not meant her harm, he was no longer entirely certain what he had meant, it had been a long time and he had wanted the thing so badly. The wisdom of Rowena, not a book, not a portrait, a mind. Whole and waking and able to teach what the world had lost, what he had spent his whole long life trying and failing to reconstruct from fragments and corpses of books. One of the silver instruments, the smallest, the one shaped like a wren with a clouded glass eye, had turned its head 3 degrees to the south-southwest sometime in the last fortnight, and was holding it there and trembling. Dumbledore stood for a long while at the window, his hands folded, his face arranged into the gentle and somewhat tired expression his own portraits would one day wear, and underneath the arrangement his mind moved the way it always moved, which was quickly and kindly, and without ever once mistaking kindness for the absence of resolve. A child, of course it would be the child. The protection he had built around the child who lived in Little Winging ran on the same old blood, more or less, that the legends said the working keyed to. He had wondered idly, across the years, whether the two might one day brush against each other, and had filed the wondering away as the sort of long shot that never came in. And here it was come in, the wren's head turned and trembling toward Little Winging, toward the only child in Little Winging he had ever cared about, and the question was no longer whether the wisdom of Rowena had surfaced, but what was to be done now by him, who loved that child in the particular way he loved everything that was both precious and useful, which was a real love, and was not the only thing it was. Well, said Albus Dumbledore aloud to the wren in the gentle voice, while his eyes did the cold arithmetic the gentle voice was built to cover. We had better go and see. He did not go that day or the next. He was a patient creature, and patience had served him where haste had ruined better men, and a thing that had stayed hidden for 1,000 years would not flee in a fortnight. He would prepare. He would learn the shape of it from a distance first, lay the gentlest of touches against the edges of whatever ward enclosed it, feel for the seams, the way one feels for the loose brick in a wall one fully intends, in time and with the very best of intentions, to take down. Harry mended the seam that afternoon, and it took him 3 hours, and at the end of it his nose was bleeding and his hands would not quite stop shaking, and he had never been so tired in his life, not even the time Uncle Vernon had made him repaint the whole back fence in a day. Rowena talked him through every strand. He could not see the working with his eyes. He had to hold it in the wanting place, the whole frayed shape of it, while his thinking mind kept trying to grab the picture and crush it the way it had crushed the light, and the holding while not gripping was the hardest thing he had ever done with the inside of his head. She taught him to find the loose strand, the soft old end of it where it had pulled free of the weave, and to coax it back, not force it, never force a working. A forced working remembers being forced and resents you for it, and to lay it back along its old path and persuade it that it had never left. Twice he lost the whole shape and had to build his picture of it again from nothing, and the second time he wanted to throw the apple core, the bent nail, the whole cold room, and she let him want it and waited and said only, "The wanting to quit is part of the working. Breathe through it the way you breathe through the cold. It is not telling you the truth about what you can do. It is only telling you that you are tired, which I already knew." When the last strand sat back down into the weave and the snagging feeling smoothed out under his attention like a sheet pulled flat, the windows of the study deepened very slightly, the pond color of them going one shade further down and in, and the cold came back stronger, the good cold, the held breath cold, the house drawing itself a little tighter against the world. "There," said Rowena. "You felt the windows answer. The whole working is keyed together, you see. Mend one part well and the rest takes heart. The house knows it is being cared for again. It has not been cared for properly since Cassius died, and a working that has been neglected is like a dog that has been neglected. It does not stop loving you, but it learns not to expect you, and the learning shows." She watched him pinch his bleeding nose and tip his head back as she had told him to. "You did that at 7. I want you to hold on to how impossible it felt, because I am going to ask far more impossible things of you soon, and the only proof you will have that they are possible is the memory that this one was." "The hand," Harry said thickly through the pinch. "The one at the edges, is it Crail?" Rowena was quiet for a moment, and when she answered carefully, as she answered when the true answer was one she did not like. "No," she said. "I have been listening too, while you worked, in the way I can listen, which is older and further than you. The hand pulling at the seam is patient and curious and very, very strong, and it does not feel hungry the way you describe Crail to me as hungry. It feels gentle, it feels sorry, it feels like a hand that strokes the dog it is measuring for the leash." She looked at him. "Crail is coming, Harry, and Crail is the danger we can name, and a danger you can name is a danger you can prepare for. But the hand at the edges is not Crail. The hand at the edges has been searching for me very kindly for 50 years and has just this fortnight after 50 years felt my heart beat through the wall." Her voice did not rise. It went, if anything, quieter. "We are going to have two of them then, the one who wants to use me and the one who wants to keep me. And I tell you now so that you will not be surprised when the day comes and your own heart tries to lie to you about it, that of the two, it is not always the hungry one who does the most harm. Now tip your head back further and breathe 446 and stop trying to plan the war before you have stopped your own nose bleeding. Tomorrow is soon enough. Tomorrow we begin to make you into something neither of those hands expects." Chapter 3 and Chapter 4. The mind is a castle, and you have left the gate open. September took half his daylight and most of his freedom, because September meant school, and school meant a uniform with a name tape that was not his name, and 7 hours a day in a room where he had to be careful to get the third best mark in the class and never the first. That last part was new. Rowena had insisted on it. "You will not be top of your form," she had told him in the flat voice that did not bargain. "You will be a little above the middle, where no teacher looks twice and no child decides you need taking down. A clever child who shows it is a clever child who is noticed, and you cannot afford to be noticed, not this year, not by anyone. So you will get your sums slightly wrong on purpose, which I promise you is harder than getting them right, and a more useful discipline besides, because a person who can choose to fail is a person who has mastered the thing far more completely than a person who can only succeed." She had paused. "Salazar taught me that, in fact. It is the one piece of him I have never been able to make myself resent." So Harry sat in Mrs. Cole's class and made deliberate small errors and watched himself be unremarkable, and stole his lessons from the edges of the day now, the half hour before school when he could get to the Crow House and back at a dead run, the rare free afternoon, the Saturdays. The teaspoon dipped into the sea had become a thimble, and Rowena had responded by changing what she put in it. "We are done for a while with the wanting and the breath and the seam in the floor," she said on the first Saturday of the new term. "Those were the foundations. You have them, they will not leave you. We build upward now. And the thing we build first, before the runes, before any of the rest, is a wall around the one room in this whole affair that is currently standing wide open with the lamp lit, which is your mind." She regarded him with the look that meant a thing she was about to say mattered more than her tone would admit. "The gentle hand at the edge of the wards, the one that is not Crail. I have learned a little more of it by listening, and I must tell you what it is, because what it is changes what you must learn today and changes it from interesting to urgent. You said it's been searching for you for 50 years, kindly. Yes, and I have placed it now as you place a voice you have heard before. It is the headmaster. The headmaster of the school I built and no longer recognize." She said the word headmaster as another person might say a draft under a door, a cold fact that would, if ignored, make you ill. His name is Albus Dumbledore, and he is, I will grant him freely, the most gifted mind to hold that office in 3 centuries, and he is also a collector, in the precise sense your Hesper used the word about Crail, except that Dumbledore collects for love and for the good of the world and out of a fear that the wrong hands will get there first, which makes him a great deal more dangerous than Crail, not less. Because a man who steals for himself can be bargained with, and a man who steals for the good of the world cannot. Harry turned this over. Hesper said almost the same thing about Crail, that the kind ones are worse because by the time you see what's under the kindness you've already let them in. Your Hesper is wiser than her wand, Rowena let a beat pass. Here is the part that should frighten you, and I want it to, because fear, correctly aimed, is only attention with the safety off. Dumbledore is a legilimens. The word will mean nothing to you. It meant nothing to most people even in my day, when we called it mind-walking and considered it the rudest art there was. It means he can look into a mind as you look into a room through an open door. Not perfectly, not always, but with a glance, with a question asked at the right moment while your guard is down, he can read the surface of you, the thing you are thinking right now, the face behind the face. And your mind, Harry, is a house with every door propped open and a sign on the gate reading "Come in." You have spent your whole life learning to read other people. You have spent precisely none of it learning to keep other people from reading you, because until now no one who could do it has ever bothered to look. Harry felt the back of his neck do the thing again, the tightening, the sense of an ordinary fact turning out to have teeth. He's going to come, isn't he? He's going to come and look at me. He is going to come, said Rowena, and he is going to be very kind, and he is going to look. And when he looks, he must find a simple, slightly above middling boy who plays in the park in the afternoons and has no idea that the old house at the end of the lane is anything but a ruin. He must find that, Harry, and find nothing under it, because if he finds me he will take me gently for safekeeping, for my own good, for the good of the world, and he will be sorry about it, and he will do it anyway, and you will never see this room again. She drew herself up. So today I teach you to build the wall. It is called in the modern tongue occlumency, and it is taught badly and rarely and far too late to adults whose minds have already set like plaster. You are 7. Your mind is still wet clay. You will learn it faster and hold it deeper than any grown wizard alive, and you will hate every minute of it because of all the arts I have. This is the one that requires you to walk straight into the rooms of yourself you have spent your life learning not to enter. The wall, it turned out, was not a wall. That is the first error everyone makes, Rowena said, and you will make it too, and then you will stop. A novice imagines occlumency as a stone wall thrown up at the front of the mind, behind which everything hides. This is useless. A wall announces that there is something behind it. A mindwalker who meets a blank stone wall knows at once that he has found a person with something to hide, and a person with something to hide is the most interesting person in any room, and he will simply sit down outside your wall and wait, and walls tire and minds behind walls panic, and a panicking mind throws its secrets over its own wall like a child throwing toys out of a cot. She let him sit with the picture. No, the art is not a wall, the art is a room. You build a room at the front of your mind, a true room, furnished, lit, occupied, and you live in it while the walker is present, and you let him walk straight in and look at everything in it, and everything in it is real, and none of it is what he came for. You do not hide the secret, you hide the fact that there is a secret. You give him a whole honest house to wander, and you keep the one door he must not find behind the most boring wall in it, the wall no one ever looks at twice, because you have made the rest of the house so complete that he never thinks to count the rooms. Like the crow house, Harry said slowly. Like the wall under the stairs, it's not a secret door that looks like a secret door. It's a wall that looks like a wall in a house full of walls, so nobody counts. Rowena was silent for a moment, and when she spoke there was something in her voice she did not often let out. I have taught this art to perhaps 30 people across 1,000 years, she said. You are the first to understand it in a single sentence, and the first, I think, to understand it because you have already had to live it. You built your room years ago, Harry. The slightly stupid, slightly clumsy, easily overlooked child you show your aunt in your school in the world, that child is your front room. You have been an occlumen since before you could read. You simply never had a mindwalker to test it against, and so you never learned that the thing you do to survive Privet Drive is the deepest defensive art the wizarding world has lost. We are not going to teach you the room. You have the room. We are going to teach you to keep it lit while someone you fear is standing inside it asking you questions, which is a different and far harder thing, because the room you built for your aunt has only ever had to survive being ignored. This one must survive being searched. She made him practice on himself first. She had him build the honest front room in his mind and walk through it and check that every object in it was true, because a false thing in the front room is a crack, and a mindwalker feels a false memory as your tongue feels a chipped tooth. He cannot help it. She made him learn the difference between a memory that was lit and a memory that was merely present, for a lit memory draws the eye and a present one does not, and you will steer him by the lamps, lighting what you wish him to find and dimming what you wish him to pass. She made him do it tired and hungry and cold, and once she made him do it while reciting the 7 times table aloud and wrong, because he will not always have the courtesy to question you when you are calm, and a defense that only holds in stillness is a roof that only keeps out fair weather. And then she had him take the one thing she had forbidden him to think about while Dumbledore was near, the Crow House, the cold study, her own painted face, and she taught him to fold it small and set it not in a locked box, because a locked box is a wall, but behind an ordinary dull memory of nothing. The most tedious afternoon you can dredge up, a real one, so real it bores even you, and you set the great secret in its shadow. And you make the boring afternoon so vivid and so complete that the walker's attention slides off it as the lane's eyes slide off this house. "What's my boring afternoon?" Harry asked. "That," said Rowena, "is for you to choose, and you must choose it now, and it must be true, and you must never tell me what it is, not because I would betray you, but because a secret known by two is a secret kept by neither, and you are going to have to learn to be alone with the most important things, which is the loneliest lesson there is, and the one I am sorriest to have to teach a child, and the one I will not spare you, because the alternative to learning it is worse," Harry thought. And then he had it, and he did not say it, but Rowena watched his face go still and unreadable in a new way, a way she had not taught him, a way that was wholly his own, and she gave a small nod, because she understood that he had found his dull room and shut its door, and that whatever was in it was now further from her than her own death, and that this was correct and cost her something all the same. The hard part came the second Saturday, and it was the part she had warned him about, the part where the art required him to enter the rooms of himself he had spent his life learning not to enter. "A front room is not enough," Rowena said. "I told you the walker feels a false thing like a chipped tooth, he also feels an absent thing. If your front room is a happy ordinary boyhood with no shadows in it, he will know at once it is a fiction, because there are no childhoods without shadows, and a childhood with the shadows painted out is a childhood that has been arranged, and an arranged mind is a defended mind, and we are back to the wall that announces itself. So your front room must have its shadows, real ones. You must let him find sorrow in you, Harry, true sorrow, freely, so that he finds what he expects to find in an orphan raised by people who do not love him and stops looking for what he does not expect. You must give him the cupboard." Harry went very still. "I won't," he said. It was the first time he had ever refused her anything. "I know," said Rowena, and she did not sharpen it, did not turn it into a lesson, did not arm it. "I know what I am asking. I am asking you to take the thing you have spent 7 years making sure no one sees, and put it in the front room where a stranger will walk through it and feel sorry for you, and being felt sorry for, you told me once, is worse than being hit. I remember you saying it. I have forgotten very little in 1,000 years, and I have forgotten nothing you have said." She was quiet. "Here is why I ask it, and then I will let you decide, because this one you must decide and not merely obey. The cupboard is your strongest wall, because it is the truest pain you own, and the truest pain is the thing the mindwalker least expects to be allowed to see, and so it is the last place he will think to look for a trick. You will give him the cupboard, and he will believe he has found the bottom of you, and he will stop digging, because a kind man stops digging when he reaches a child's pain. He cannot help it. His kindness is a door that only opens inward. Your wound offered freely is a stronger wall than any stone I could teach you to build. That is the terrible economy of this art and of this world, and I did not make it, and I would unmake it for you if I could, and I cannot, and so I am teaching it to you instead, which is the only honest thing left to do." Harry sat on the cold floor for a long time. He thought about the cupboard. Not the idea of it, which he kept in the front of his mind where it did no harm, but the actual cupboard, the 11 inches of dark above his face, the spider he had named and then been ashamed of naming, the sound of the family eating on the other side of the door, the specific arithmetic of a stomach that has learned to be quiet. He thought about the pencil line and the small person who had drawn it and never grown past it. He had spent his life keeping all of this in a box, and she was asking him to take it out and set it in a lit room and let a kind old stranger walk through it and pity him. "It'll still be mine," he said at last, working it out aloud, which was how he worked everything out. "Even if I show it to him, he'll see it, but it'll still be mine. He doesn't get to keep it just because he looked at it." He raised his head. "That's the trick, isn't it? Not the boring afternoon. The trick is that letting someone see a thing isn't the same as giving it to them. I always thought it was the same. That's why I hid everything, because I thought being seen was the same as being taken." The study was very quiet. "Yes," said Rowena Ravenclaw, and her painted voice was not quite steady, which he had heard exactly once before on the first day when she told him what she was. "That is the trick. That is the whole of the trick, and it is a truth far larger than this art, and you have just found it yourself at 7 on the floor of a dead woman's study. And I want you to understand that in 1,000 years of teaching I have watched grown wizards go to their graves never having learned it. Being seen is not the same as being taken. You may show your whole self to the world and keep your whole self entire. The hiding was never what kept you. You kept you. The cupboard was never your wall." She paused and let him have the silence, and then, because she was who she was, she put the edge back on it, gently, sheathing a blade she intended to use again. Now build the front room, put the cupboard in it, light it, and let me walk through, because I am the only mindwalker you will ever trust to practice on, and I would not waste that trust, and we have a great deal less time than I would spend on this if the world were kinder. She walked through his mind that afternoon. It did not feel as he had braced for. It felt like the moment in the seam mending when she had held the shape of the working alongside him, present and exacting and on his side, except that the working was him. She found the cupboard where he had set it, lit and honest, and he felt her find it, felt the old shame come up his throat, and felt her do the thing he had not known a person could do, which was to look at his pain without taking it and without pitying it, to look at it as she looked at a difficult line of an old text, with respect, as a thing that was hard and worth understanding. And behind the cupboard, in the shadow of a true dull afternoon he had spent counting the bricks in the back wall while waiting out a punishment, she did not find the Crow house at all, though she knew exactly where it was because she had taught him where to put it, and she passed it twice on purpose to show him that even she who knew slid off it. "Adequate," she said when she withdrew, in the tone that meant remarkable. "He comes soon. You are ready." "You are not ready enough. No one is ever ready enough, but you are ready, which is a different and a sufficient thing. Go home, Harry, eat what you can. And when the kind old man comes, and he will come kindly, you will be a slightly above middling boy with a sad childhood and nothing whatsoever to hide, and you will let him see the sadness, and you will keep the rest, because being seen is not the same as being taken, and you learned that here, and no one can ever unteach you a thing you learned for yourself." He came on a Tuesday in the ordinary clothes of an old man on a bench, and Harry nearly walked past him. That was the first thing Harry noticed, and the thing that frightened him most later when he took the afternoon apart. That Albus Dumbledore, the most gifted mind to hold the headmaster's office in 3 centuries, had made himself into a thing the eye slid off, exactly as the Lane's eye slid off the Crow house. He sat on the bench by the war memorial in his ordinary mac and his ordinary hat, feeding the ordinary pigeons, and there was nothing about him to catch on, and that nothing was so complete that Harry, who caught on everything, knew at once that it was made. "Hello," said the old man, not looking up from the pigeons. "You're walking home the long way, past the memorial, past the church, down by the allotments. The short way is through the snicket by the Henry's house. I only mention it because you took the long way yesterday as well, and the day before, and a boy who takes the long way home 3 days running is either avoiding someone or thinking about something, and you don't have the look of a boy avoiding someone." He turned then, and his eyes were very blue and very kind, and rested on Harry with a warmth that Harry felt in his chest like sunlight, and distrusted exactly because he felt it. "Forgive me. An old man's habit, watching people and guessing. A bad habit. Won't you sit a moment? The pigeons are greedy and I have too much bread." Harry sat because not sitting would have been a thing, and he built his front room as he sat, lit it, walked through it once fast as Rowena had drilled, and then he lived in it, a slightly above middling boy who took the long way home because the snicket by the Henrys had a dog that frightened him, which was true, there was a dog, and he set the true fear of the true dog at the front where it could be found. "I'm not supposed to talk to strangers," Harry said, which was the kind of thing his front room self would say. "Quite right too," said Dumbledore, "and I am the strangest of strangers, so you may leave the moment you like, and I shall not be offended." He tossed a crust. The pigeons fought over it. "I knew your parents, you know, a little, a long time ago." He said it lightly, watching the pigeons and not Harry, and Harry felt the question inside the statement as you feel the hook inside the bait, felt the old man's attention come to rest very gently against the front of his mind, not pushing, just resting, a hand laid on a door to feel if anyone is moving on the other side. Harry let him feel the front room. He let him feel a boy who had been told, by an aunt who hated saying it, that his parents had died in a car crash and had been drunk and had left him with nothing. And he let the old hurt of that lie sit honest at the front, because it was honest, the hurt was real even if the lie was not, and he let Dumbledore find it. And he felt Dumbledore find it, and he felt something happen in the old man that the old man did not show. A stillness, a recalculation, the cold setting down of a piece of news, exactly like the look Rowena had given his name and Hesper had given his name, except that this one had 50 years of searching behind it, and a wren with a clouded eye trembling on a desk in the north. "A car crash," said Dumbledore softly, "and there was real sorrow in it." Harry could hear that the sorrow was real, and could hear underneath the sorrow the part that was measuring. "I am sorry, that is not how it was, but I am sorry that is what you were told, and one day someone will tell you the truth, and I hope they tell it kindly." He was quiet a moment. "You seem a thoughtful boy. Tell me, do you ever walk out past the old houses at the end of the lane, boys your age like a ruin as a rule? A place to be king of. There's an old place down Old Mill Lane, I'm told, quite forgotten, quite empty. I wondered if you'd ever explored it." And there it was, laid down so gently that a child who had not spent a month being taught by Rowena Ravenclaw would have walked straight into it. The whole question, the only question, dressed up as an old man's small talk about a boy's games. Harry made his front room self wrinkle its nose. "The Crow house," he said with the particular scorn of a child for a thing the bigger children have lied about. "It's haunted. Wayne Hopkins says there's crows in the chimneys that peck your eyes out. It's stupid. I went up to the gate once and a bird shouted at me and I ran off. He let himself look embarrassed about the running, a true small shame freely given. Dudley says only babies believe it. I don't go there. There's a dog by the Henrys, but at least the snicket doesn't have crows. He shrugged, a slightly above middling shrug, and inside the front room he kept the lamp steady and did not so much as glance at the dull afternoon of counting bricks, behind which the cold study sat folded small and unseen. Dumbledore looked at him for a moment longer, and the gentle attention resting against the front of Harry's mind pressed, very slightly, testing a floorboard to hear if it is sound, and met a frightened boy in a haunted house story and a dog in a snicket, all of it true, all of it complete, and found no crack, no chipped tooth, no arranged silence, nothing but a sad ordinary child who took the long way home. He withdrew. Harry felt him withdraw, felt the hand lift off the door. "Crows in the chimneys," Dumbledore said, and chuckled, and the chuckle was warm and seemed entirely genuine, and probably was, because Harry had begun to understand that the most dangerous thing about this old man was that nothing in him was false. The kindness was real, the sorrow was real, the warmth was real, and all of it was also a tool held in a hand that had decided long ago what it was willing to do to the people it was kind to. "Well, you're a sensible boy to leave the crows to themselves. Some old houses are best not disturbed." He stood, brushing crumbs from his mac, and looked down at Harry with the blue eyes that Harry would see in his sleep that night. "It was a great pleasure to meet you, Harry. I expect we shall meet again when you're a little older. Until then, mind the dog and take whichever way home you like, and remember, if you ever should remember it, being told a thing is true is not the same as it being true, even by an old man on a bench." He smiled. "Especially by an old man on a bench." And he walked away, ordinary and forgettable, an old man. The eye slid off, and Harry sat by the war memorial with his heart slamming against his ribs and his front room still lit, and his great secret still folded small and safe in the dark behind the bricks, and understood that he had won, and understood in the same breath that the old man had let him see exactly that he was the kind of person who could be beaten and had chosen today not to win. And that this was somehow more frightening than losing. He took the afternoon apart on the walk home as she had taught him, every word and every silence, and the part he kept coming back to was the last thing, the thing about being told and being true, because it had not been small talk. It had been a gift or a test or a warning, and possibly all three at once, and he understood that the old man had handed him, on a bench, the exact principle Rowena had spent a month carving into him. Being seen is not being taken, being told is not being true, and that an enemy who teaches you the very thing you will need to defeat him is not an enemy you have understood yet and might never. "He let you keep it," Rowena said when Harry had reported every word, the dull parts and the bricks and the blue eyes and the last thing about the bench. "Which means he is not certain. Which means he is doing what he has done for 50 years, what he does better than any living soul, which is to wait. He suspects a child has found the thing he has hunted his whole life, and he has decided not to frighten the child, because a frightened child runs, and a child who runs might run somewhere he cannot follow, and so he will be kind and patient and present, and he will wait for you to make the one mistake that opens the door for him." She was very still in her frame. "He is the most dangerous thing that has ever come near this house, Harry, and he has just walked away smiling, and I want you to understand that the walking away was the most dangerous thing he did. A man who can afford to walk away is a man who believes time is on his side. We must make time lie to him. And Crail's the other one," Harry said, "the hungry one. Crail is the other one." Rowena's voice changed, dropped, took on the cadence she used for the things that were older than the modern world and larger than it. "And now I must tell you the rest of what Crail wants, because Dumbledore's visit has bought us nothing but a little time, and I would rather you spent that time afraid of the right thing than comfortable with the wrong one. Sit. This is the cosmic part and the cold part, and you will not sleep well tonight, and I am sorry, and I am telling you anyway." She let the cold of the room deepen until it had the quality of the space between stars. "I told you of the dividing of the self, the anchoring of a piece of you into a thing outside your body, so that while the thing endures you cannot truly die. I told you I used a clean corner of it to make myself a teacher. I did not tell you the whole of what it is, because the whole of it is the worst thing human beings have ever learned to do, and it should be spoken of only once and never lightly." She paused. "To divide the self, you must first break it, and the self does not break as a stick breaks. The self breaks only as the self can be broken, by an act so against the grain of what a person is that it tears the soul along a seam that was never meant to part. There is one act that does it reliably. I will not name it to a child. It is the worst act there is, and it is the price, and Crail has paid it more than once by your Hesper's account, every time one of the old hidden things went quiet and he grew a little harder to kill. Each thing he found, he did not merely steal. He fed it the price and split himself again and hid another piece of himself in another stolen working, so that now he is not one man with one death but a man scattered across a dozen hidden anchors, and to kill him you would have to find and unmake everyone, and he has spent 30 years making sure no one ever could. Her painted eyes found his in the dark. And I, Harry, I am the prize above all the others, because I do not merely contain 1,000 years of the lost arts. I contain the art itself, the clean version and the black, the whole theory of the binding of mind to matter, which is the one thing he does not fully have, and the one thing that would let him do what he has done not 1,000 times but 1,000, and become a thing the world has not seen since the worst of the old ages, a thing that cannot be killed because there is no longer enough of the world left outside him to do the killing. She let it hang. That is what wants this house. That is the hand pulling at the seam in your floor, not a thief, a man who is most of the way to becoming a kind of god and needs only me to finish, and has just learned, as Dumbledore has learned, that the door has opened for a child. Harry sat in the cold that was like the space between stars, 7 years old, and did not say anything for a long while, because there was nothing to say that would not be smaller than the silence, and this time the silence was very large indeed. Then we have to be ready before he comes, he said finally. His voice was small, but it did not shake, because he had spent a month learning how to keep it from shaking. Both of them, the hungry one and the kind one, we have to make this house into something neither of them expects. You said that. You said tomorrow we'd start. I did. So what's tomorrow? Tomorrow, said Rowena Ravenclaw, and for the first time the bleakness in her voice was crossed with something else, something that in a living person he would have called pride. You stop mending the workings other people built. Tomorrow you learn to make your own. Tomorrow we begin the runes, the real ones, the eldest sort, the ones cut before England, and we begin to write defenses into this house that have not been written into anything for 1,000 years, defenses that Dumbledore has only read about and Crail has only dreamed of, and we write them in the one hand neither of them will think to look for, which is the hand of a slightly above middling boy who is afraid of a dog in a snicket. Hesper was waiting for him in the lane 2 evenings later, in the blue hour when the streetlights were deciding whether to come on, and Harry knew before she spoke that something had changed, because she had never come this close to the house before, never crossed from the proper road into the overgrown mouth of Old Mill Lane, and she was standing inside it now with her arms wrapped around herself and her grandfather's wand gripped in one fist. It's been a death, she said without greeting, because she had stopped being a person who greeted. Up Manchester way, a man called Pettigrew, no, not that Pemberton, old Edgar Pemberton, he kept bees and a little working his mother left him, a charmstone, nothing grand, a thing that kept the frost off an acre of orchard, been in his family since before the railways. Her voice was flat and fast, the voice of someone reciting a thing so they do not have to feel it. He's dead, found him a week back. Heart, they're saying he was old, it's nothing, it's natural. Except the charmstone gone and the orchard's gone to frost overnight in October, every tree black, and I had it from the same friend of a friend who tells me things, the last of my granddad's lot who will still talk to a thorn, that there was a gentleman seen in the village the day before. Polite, asking after old families, asking after things kept in families. He looked at Harry and the streetlight chose that moment to come on and put its hard orange over her face. It's him. He's working his way down the list and he's getting bolder and he's coming south and the list ends here. You understand me, whatever she's teaching you in there, no matter how clever you're getting, he's not a story, love. He killed a beekeeper for a frost stone last week as easy as you post a letter, and you're 7. I know how old I am, Harry said. Everyone keeps telling me. Then act it, but there was no heat in it. She scrubbed her face with the heel of her hand. The gesture he was learning was the most Hesper thing about her. No, don't, that's the whole trouble, isn't it? There's no time for you to act it. She crouched down so she was level with him as she had on the terrace, and the wand went into her coat pocket and her voice dropped out of its flat recital into something rower. I came to say, I'm done hiding from him. I've been 3 years running, 3 years letting that house sit there waiting, and now there's a dead beekeeper and an orchard full of black trees and a list with our name at the bottom of it, and I can't open the door but I can stand in front of it, which is the one thing the gift not coming never stopped me doing. So whatever you're building in there, build it fast and tell her, the thing in the frame, tell her Cassius Thorne's granddaughter is back on the watch and she's not running anymore. She stood up, knees cracking, and tell her I'm sorry it took a man dying to put the spine back in me. She'll have something cutting to say about that. She always did, my granddad said, couldn't pass a person's worst moment without improving on it. Almost, the corner of her mouth moved. Go on, you'll be missed, and Harry, mind how you go in the dark, it's not just the dog in the snicket anymore. He went in through the gap in the fence under the autumn stars, hard and far, and he stood a moment in the cold of the back garden and looked up at them and thought about a man scattered across a dozen acres, and a kind old man waiting on a bench, and a beekeeper dead for a frost stone, and a woman who could not open a door deciding to stand in front of it anyway, and 1,000 years of lost magic folded into a painting at the end of the lane that had chosen, of everyone in the world, him. Then he went inside and ate the cold remains of a dinner left out for the bins, slowly 446, making it go further, and went to his cupboard, and lay in the dark that was only dark now and not the whole of the world, and did not sleep well, exactly as Rowena had promised, but slept, which a month ago he could not have done with all of that in his head, and that, he understood as he went under, was itself a kind of armor she had given him. And he was beginning to suspect it might be the most important kind. Chapter 4 and Chapter 5, Runes older than Latin. Give me your hand, said Rowena on the first morning of the runes, and I will tell you the oldest true thing there is. Harry held up his hand. There was nothing in the frame to take it, she had no hands, but he understood by now that her instructions were sometimes shapes for him to make so that his body would teach his mind, and he held it up palm out in the grey cold of the study and waited. Look at it, she said. 5 fingers, now why 5? I don't know, everyone's got 5. Wrong question then, not why do you have 5, but why does it matter that you have 5? It matters because 5 is the first number a mind can hold without counting. Show a person 3 stones and they see 3, show them 4 and they see 4, show them 5 and most still see 5, and at 6 the seeing fails and the counting begins. 5 is the edge of what the mind grasps whole. And so, Harry, when the first people who could do what you and I do reached for a way to write down a working, a way to set a piece of will into a mark that would hold it after the hand had gone, they did not invent letters, because letters are for sentences and sentences are slow. They invented runes, which are not letters. A letter stands for a sound. A rune stands for a thing held whole, a thing the mind grasps as it grasps 5 all at once without counting. She let that settle. You felt it on the first day on my frame. You asked the mark what it was for, and it did not spell the answer. It gave you the whole of holding in a single breath more than you had a floor for. That is a rune. It is a fist of meaning, closed, and when you cut it true, the meaning stays closed in it for 1,000 years, and anyone who opens their attention to it as you did takes the whole fist into themselves at once. That is why they are dangerous, a book you can put down. A rune, once you have truly read it, is in you, and a great working of many runes read all at once has killed grown wizards who thought themselves clever. We will go slowly, we will go one fist at a time. She taught him the first eldest rune that morning, and it took the whole morning, and it was a single stroke. It was not the holding rune from her frame. That one, she said, was too strong for a hand to make until the hand had made 100 weaker ones. The first he would learn to cut, not merely to touch, was the rune the old people had used to mean here. The simplest fist there was, the one that said only this place and not another, this and not that, the rune of the threshold, the foundation under every ward ever built. Every working begins with here, Rowena said. Before you can keep a thing out, you must say where the out begins. Before you can hide a house, you must tell the world where the house is not. Here is the first word of every defense, and it is the first word you will learn to write, and you will write it badly for a long time, because a rune written badly is not a weak rune. It is a wrong rune, it holds the wrong fist, and a ward built on a wrong here keeps out the people you love and lets in the people you fear, and there is no error in all the arts more common or more deadly. He had no knife, she would not let him use one yet. The knife is for stone and bone and the great anchors, and you are not ready for those, and besides, a child carrying a knife is a child who is noticed, and we have discussed being noticed. Instead, she had him cut the rune in the dust of the floor with his finger over and over while she watched the line of it and told him each time the precise manner in which it was wrong, too curved, too hurried, begun from the wrong end, finished without intention so that the fist hung open and the meaning leaked. Again. You drew here, but you were thinking about your supper, and so the rune means here roughly when convenient, and a ward does not understand roughly or convenient. A ward is the most literal thing in the world. It will do exactly what you wrote and nothing of what you meant. Again, mean it, here, not there, not anywhere, here. By the end of the morning, the dust of the study floor was a palimpsest of 100 failed thresholds, and Harry's finger had worn a shine on the boards, and on the 100-and-something attempt he drew the single stroke and felt it close. He felt the fist shut. It was the same feeling as the light, the same as the seam, the undermined reaching out and the world reaching back, except that this time the world did not merely answer. It agreed. It took the mark he had made and held it, and for a moment the patch of dusty floor under his finger was here in a way the rest of the floor was not, was a place the house now knew about. A pinned point, a nail driven into the fabric of where things are, and Harry took his finger away, and the mark sat in the dust, glowing with no light. Which is to say, not glowing at all, and yet unmistakably more there than the boards around it. There, said Rowena very quietly. You have written your first true word in the oldest language there is. It says here, and it means here, and it will go on meaning here after you and I are both dust, unless someone unmakes it, and no one will, because no one will ever find it, because you cut it in the floor of a house the world cannot see. She was silent a moment. I have watched a great many people learn to do that. I have never watched anyone do it at 7, and I find I do not have anything cutting to say about it, which has not happened to me in some centuries, so we will move on quickly before I embarrass us both. They did not move on quickly. The second rune took the rest of the week, and it was not seen, and it was harder than here by an order Harry did not have the arithmetic for, because here was a statement and not seen was an argument, a quarrel you pick with the eyes of every person who will ever pass, and you must win it before they know it has begun. Where here pinned a point, not seen draped it, and a drape that hangs wrong is worse than no drape. for a clumsy concealment is a thing the eye snags on, a wrongness, a held breath, and a wrongness draws attention exactly as a beauty does. He cut not seen 40 times in the dust, and each time felt it hang lopsided, felt the corner of it that did not lie flat, until at last, exhausted, hollowed, he stopped trying to make it lie flat and simply wanted it flat as he wanted the light, and let the undermind do the lying flat that the thinking mind could not, and the drape settled, and the patch of floor where he had cut here and not seen together went quietly, completely absent. So that his own eye slid off it, and he had to feel for it with his hand to know it was still there. That, said Rowena, is 2 words, here and not seen. Put 100 more around them in the right order, and you have a house the world forgets it ever knew. We are going to put 100 more around them, not today. Today you bleed from the nose and go home and eat. Tomorrow we begin to build. They did not begin to build the next day in the end, because that was the afternoon the talking turned, without either of them steering it, to Helena. It began with the diadem. Harry, sitting with his worn finger tucked under his arm, had asked the question he had been saving, the one she had put off twice. You said the diadem was a lesser version of what you are, that you poured a fraction of yourself into a crown because you thought wisdom could be made into a thing and worn. What happened to it? You said it was stolen, who stole it, and the study went still in a manner he had learned to recognize, the stillness that was not the cold and not the held breath, but something the painting did when a thing was about to cost her. My daughter stole it, said Rowena Ravenclaw. Harry did not say anything, he had learned that too. Helena, my only child. She was clever, Harry, cleverer than I was at her age, and I made the error every gifted parent makes with a gifted child, which is that I loved the gift and forgot to love the girl. Or rather, I loved the girl through the gift. I praised the cleverness and not the child who carried it. And a child who is loved for her cleverness learns that she is only as loved as she is clever. And that is a hunger that no amount of praise ever fills. It only digs the hole deeper. Her painted voice had gone level and precise, the furthest from calm register, except that now Harry understood it was not anger she was furthest from, it was grief. She wanted to be wiser than me, not for wisdom's sake, to be loved more by being more, because more was the only currency I had ever taught her. And the diadem was wisdom you could put on your head, so she took it. She ran with my crown, my poured-out fraction, to a forest far away, to make herself wise in a single stroke and come home and be at last enough. She paused. She did not know that the diadem did not make you wise. It only made you certain, which is the counterfeit of wisdom and the opposite of it, and a frightened girl made certain is the most dangerous and the most pitiable thing there is. What happened to her? A man followed her. A man I had once foolishly asked to find her and bring her home, of my own house, who loved her in the broken way that broken men love. And when he found her in the forest and she would not come home, would not give up the crown, would not stop being certain, he lost the part of himself that knew the difference between loving a thing and owning it, which is the only part that matters, and he killed her. The words came out flat and bare, with no softening anywhere in them, and that was the most terrible thing about them. He killed my daughter in a forest over a crown I made out of my own pride, and then he understood what he had done, and he killed himself, and I was alive still in my tower, and I felt her go. A mother feels it. There's a rune for that too, did you know, in the oldest hand. A single fist of meaning that holds the whole of a mother feels her child go out of the world. The old people needed it often in the burning years. I have never been able to make myself cut it, not once in 1,000 years, and I am the only one left who remembers how. Harry sat on the cold floor and looked up at the painted woman who had been waiting 1,000 years in the dark, and he did the only thing he could think of, which was the thing no one had ever done for him and which he had therefore had to invent from nothing. He did not say he was sorry, because sorry was a word people used to make a sad thing go away so they could stop having to look at it, and he did not look away because looking away was abandonment, and he knew that better than anyone. He stayed. He kept his eyes on her painted eyes, and he let the silence be as big as it needed to be, and he did not try to fix it or shrink it or end it. After a while he said, "Is that why you made yourself a teacher instead of a crown? Because the crown made her certain, and you wanted to make somebody wise instead, properly, the slow way." The painting was quiet for a very long time. "Do you know," said Rowena Ravenclaw at last, and her voice had changed, had lost the level precision and gone to something rower and younger and more human than he had ever heard from her. "In 1,000 years, no one has asked me that. No one has ever once understood that the working you sit inside is an apology to a dead girl. That I could not make Helena wise because I tried to make her more, and so I swore that if the world ever gave me another, I would not praise the gift, I would teach the child slowly the way it should be done, the way I failed to do it the first time." The painted eyes were bright in the gray light. "I told you on the first day I had not decided whether the waiting was a mistake. I have decided it was not. You are not Helena. I am not trying to make you Helena. But you are the second child a careless world handed to me untaught, and I am not going to fail you as I failed her, and that Harry Potter is the truest thing I have told you, and I will deny having told it if you ever repeat it, because a 1,000-year-old founder of Hogwarts has a reputation to maintain, and it does not include weeping into a painted handkerchief in front of an infant who cannot yet cut a clean rune. I cut a clean here, Harry pointed out, because he understood now that the way to give her back her footing was to let her be sharp at him. You cut one clean here out of 112, said Rowena, and the rawness folded itself away, and the dryness came back like a tide returning to familiar shore, which makes you a person who has cut here clean precisely as often as the law of averages would predict for a determined imbecile. Cut me 10 in a row and I will admit you can do it on purpose. Now stop looking at me like that. We have a house to defend and a great deal less time than feelings require. Pick up your worn finger and write me here, and this time mean it the same as you meant staying still just now, because that, as it happens, is exactly what a threshold rune is, a refusal to look away from where you are. Over the next 3 weeks, Harry built a thing in the floor and the walls of the study that had not been built in Britain for 1,000 years. He did not build it alone, and he did not build it quickly, and he did not build it without cost. Rowena designed it. She carried the whole shape of it in her 1,000-year mind and fed it to him one fist at a time, here and then not seen and then turn aside and then forget, and then the binding runes that tied them into a sentence, a true sentence in the oldest hand, a concealment array of the deep sort, the sort that did not merely make the house hard to notice but made the idea of the house slippery, so that a searcher's own thoughts would slide off it. So that a man could stand in the lane with the address written on his hand and find his attention wandering to his shopping. It was the same art Cassius Thorne had built into the windows, but Cassius had built it with more love than skill, and Harry, guided by the mind that had invented the art, built it with a skill that frightened even her. He learned, in those 3 weeks, things about himself he had no words for and did not look at too closely. He learned that a working left half-cut overnight would wake him in the cupboard with the shape of the next stroke burning behind his eyes, demanding to be finished. He learned that the runes had a kind of gravity, that once you had cut 3 you could feel where the 4th wanted to go, that a true array was not assembled like a wall but grown like a plant, each fist reaching toward the next along lines that had been there before he drew them, waiting. He learned that he could ruin an hour's work with a single distracted stroke and that Rowena would not let him paint over the ruin, for a working remembers being corrected, and a corrected working is a working with a scar, and a scar is a weakness, and we are not building a thing that may have weaknesses. We begin the panel again from nothing, and you will do it without complaining, because the one who is coming will not care how tired your hand is. Hesper helped from outside in the only ways the gift that skipped her left open. She could not cut a rune or feel a working, but she could read her grandfather's books, the ones the Thorns had kept for 10 centuries and never been able to fully use, and she found in a margin in Cassius's own cramped hand the recipe for an ink the old keepers had made, an ink of oak gall and iron and 3 things that grew only in graveyards, for the fixing of marks meant to outlast the cutter, and she made it in her pebble-dashed kitchen, swearing. And brought it to the lane in a jam jar wrapped in a tea towel, and left it inside the gap in the railings because she still could not pass the inner wall, and Harry carried it in, and Rowena looked at it through his eyes and said, Cassius's mother's recipe. I taught it to a Thorn in 14-something. Tell the girl it is correct and tell her I said so, because she will pretend not to care and she will care, and Harry told her, and Hesper pretended not to care and cared. She did more than the ink in those weeks. She watched the lane. She walked the proper road at the hours a stranger might come, and noted the cars that did not belong, and once, white-faced, told Harry she had seen a gentleman at the bus stop, very polite, very still, in a good coat, watching nothing in particular for 40 minutes, and that when she had walked past him close enough to see his face she had had to keep walking and not stop and not run, because every animal part of her had wanted to run, and a thing you run from is a thing you teach to chase. It was him, she said. I'd swear it was him, Crail, just looking, just letting me know he can look. And Harry had carried that into Rowena, and Rowena had been quiet a long moment and then said only, then we cut faster, and they had. With the ink, the runes could leave the dust and go into the wood, the stone, the very plaster permanent, and the array began to close. Harry felt the house change around him as it did. The cold deepened and steadied. The windows went one shade further down into their pond dark. The seam in the floor, which he had mended once, knit itself the rest of the way without his touching it, taking heart from the great new working rising around it. And the pulling at the edges, the gentle, patient hand of the headmaster feeling for the seams, lost its purchase week by week, slid further off, had to reach harder to find the edges at all, until one morning Harry put his palm to the floor and could not feel it any longer and reported this, and Rowena was quiet for a moment and then said, no, he has not stopped, he has been made to start over. We have moved the house in a sense without moving it, we have changed where here is, and now he must find it again from nothing. That is the best we could have done, and you did it, and it buys us perhaps a fortnight of his confusion, and we will spend the fortnight finishing, because a half-built ward is worse than none. It is a wall with a door left in it that you have forgotten you cut. It was not filler those 3 weeks, and it did not feel like a montage to Harry. It felt like the hardest sustained work of his short life, every morning a new fist of meaning, every fist leaving him hollowed and nose-bleeding and triumphant, every evening the slow 446 and the cold leftovers, and the cupboard that no longer felt small. He grew another quarter-inch. He stopped somewhere in there being a child who had found a secret, and became, without noticing the moment it happened, a child who was keeping one, which is a different and a heavier thing. And Rowena watched the change come over him and grieved it a little privately in the manner that a person grieves the necessary, and did not slow down because there was no time, because the fortnight she had bought was already spending itself. There was a morning near the end of the second week when Rowena let him touch the great rune at last. "The holding rune," she said, "the one on my frame, the one you put your finger to on the first day, the one that nearly emptied you when it was the weakest mark in the house and you the rawest hand. You are not raw now. You have cut 100 thresholds and laid half a concealment and mended a seam under fire. I think you are ready to read the strongest mark you will meet for years, and I think you must, because the array you are building leans on it, and a builder who has never felt the keystone is a builder working blind." Her painted voice went careful, "But I will not pretend it is safe. It held a mine to a vessel for 1,000 years. It is the deepest single fist of meaning in this house and possibly in this country, and if you grip it instead of letting it carry you, it will not merely empty you, it will teach your undermind that magic is a thing that hurts, and a child who learns that learns to flinch from his own gift, and I would rather you never touched another rune than learn to flinch. So breathe first, 446, until I tell you to stop, and do not be brave. Brave is for people who cannot be careful. You can be careful. Be that instead." Harry breathed until the cold room and his own racing want had both gone still, and then he set his fingertip in the worn place at the bottom of the frame, where other fingers across other centuries had worn the wood shiny, and he did not ask the rune what it was for because he already knew, and he did not try to take it because she had taught him better, and he simply let it be there, vast and patient under his finger, and let a little of it in, a thread no more. The way you let a little of the sea into a rock pool and not the whole tide, and the thread of it was enough to show him the whole. He understood, for the space of one careful breath, what it was to hold a thing across 1,000 years. Not a clenching the way Crail would later clench his scattered self, but a choosing renewed every instant for 10 centuries, the rune choosing again and again and again to keep the mind bound to the paint, never tiring, never doubting, a patience so far past anything human that it had gone round into a kind of love, the love of a thing that has decided once completely what it is for, and has never since had to decide anything else. He understood that Rowena had built it out of the only material strong enough, which was her own refusal to let Helena's death be the end of what she knew, and that the rune was, in the truest sense, made of grief that had chosen to become use. And Harry took his finger away with his eyes wet and did not wipe them, because wiping them would have been a kind of lie. "I felt what it's made of," he said. "I know," said Rowena very quietly. "I have never told anyone what it is made of. I did not have to tell you. That is the difference between reading a rune and being told about one, and it is why I will never write any of this down for you, and why books are corpses. Now, you have touched the keystone, the array will not frighten you again. Let us finish it." It was Hesper that fortnight who kept him fed, in the only way the gap in the railings allowed. She could not pass the inner wall, would never pass it, but she could reach the gap where the railings had pulled loose from the brick, and she took to leaving things there, wrapped in a tea towel. The jam jar of ink, yes, but also increasingly a heel of bread and a wedge of cheese, a hard-boiled egg, once a still warm sausage roll that Harry ate in 4 bites in the cold garden and thought about for 2 days. She never said it was for him. She left it by the gap and was gone, and Harry took it in, and neither of them mentioned it, because mentioning it would have made it charity, and they were both, he understood, people who had learned to hate charity, and so they had invented between them a way of feeding a hungry child that looked, if you squinted, like leaving rubbish by a fence. "She is feeding you," Rowena observed on the day of the sausage roll. "Do not tell her I noticed. She will stop out of pride, and you need the food more than she needs the pride, though it is a close-run thing with a thorn." A pause. "It is a good sign, Harry. A person who has decided to keep you fed has decided to keep you. The thorns have kept things for 1,000 years. It is the only thing they have ever truly been for, and she has been a keeper with nothing to keep since Cassius died, which is a kind of starvation worse than yours. You have given her something to guard again. You think she is saving you. She thinks you are saving her. You are both right, which is the only arrangement worth having." He met her at the gap one evening deliberately and did not pretend the food was rubbish, and said, "Thank you for the sausage roll," and watched her go stiff and awkward and furious in the streetlight, and then he added, before she could deny it, "She says feeding someone is the same as deciding to keep them. She says you've decided to keep me. She says I've given you something to guard again." And Hesper Thorne stood in the orange light with her arms crossed hard over herself and her jaw working, and at last said roughly, "She talks too much, that one. Always did, my granddad said," and then lower, not looking at him, "Eat the egg first tomorrow. It'll be in the towel. The bread keeps, the egg doesn't." Which was, Harry understood, exactly the same as everything Rowena had said, in the only language Hesper had for saying it, and he nodded, and ate the egg first every morning after for the rest of that fortnight by the slow 446 count, making it go further as he had been taught. The fortnight ran out on a Sunday, and it ran out because Dumbledore did not in the end find the house by searching. He found it by following Harry. Harry understood his mistake the instant he came up the buried path and felt, through the nearly finished array, a presence already inside the garden, standing among the thorny ropes of the dead roses, patient and gentle and immense. An old man in an ordinary mac with his hands folded, looking up at the windows that gave no light back, with an expression of such complete and sorrowful recognition that Harry knew before either of them spoke that the long game was over and the open one had begun. "I followed you," said Albus Dumbledore without turning. "I am not proud of it. I want you to know that I tried everything else first, every instrument, every charm, 50 years of patience, and your house defeated all of it, which is the single most remarkable thing I have encountered in a long life full of remarkable things, and I could not work out how a thing so well hidden could possibly have surfaced now, after 1,000 years, until I understood that it had not surfaced. You had found it. And a house that cannot be found by any art can still be found by the simple discourtesy of walking behind a child who knows the way." He turned then, and the blue eyes were not cold, they were wet, and Harry understood that the wetness was real and was also, like everything in this old man, a tool. "Hello, Harry, you are not a slightly above-middling boy who is frightened of a dog. You never were." That was the finest piece of occlumency I have witnessed in 70 years, and it was performed by a 7-year-old on a park bench, and there is precisely one mind in all the world that could have taught it to you, and it is on the other side of that wall, and it has been hidden from me, who has loved it and hunted it and dreamed of it since before your parents were born for half a century. His voice did not rise. "May I come in?" "No," said Harry. "I could," said Dumbledore gently, and it was not a threat, it was sadder than a threat. "I want to be honest with you because you are owed honesty and have had very little of it. I am perhaps the only living wizard who could force that wall, given time, and I have time, and I have reasons you would, I think, find compelling if you were not 7, and possibly even then. There is a darkness coming back into the world, Harry. It is not gone, it only sleeps, and when it wakes it will look for exactly the kind of power that is sitting in that room, and if it finds it before I have secured it, a great many people will die, people you will one day love. I do not want the wisdom of Rowena for myself. I want it kept safe by someone who can be trusted with it, in a place defended by more than one extraordinary child, and I am asking you to help me do that, and I am asking kindly, because I would so much rather ask than take." Harry looked up at the old man among the dead roses and made himself answer slowly, because he had learned that the first answer was the one to distrust, even when it was his own. "You keep saying secured," he said, "and safe and trusted. But you came here following a kid because every clever way didn't work, and now you're telling me you could break the wall but you'd rather I let you, and you're being so kind about it." He took a breath, 446, and did not let his voice climb. "That's the same thing Crail did to Hesper, the kind way first, the asking first, and she said the kindness went off his face like a light when she couldn't give him what he wanted. So I want to ask you something, and I want you to actually answer it, not be sad at me instead of answering. If I say no and keep saying no, what happens to the kindness? Does it stay, or does it go off like a light?" Something moved in the old man's face, and it was not the prepared sorrow. It was something underneath the sorrow that had not been arranged, and Harry, who read faces for survival, watched it happen and understood that he had reached past the front room into a place even Dumbledore did not show himself. "That," said Dumbledore after a silence, very quietly, "is a far better question than I came prepared to be asked, and I find I do not entirely like my answer, which is the most useful thing a question can do to a man my age. I do not know, Harry, I should like to tell you the kindness stays. I have spent my life believing it does. But you have just described the precise mechanism by which kind men have done terrible things since the world began, and you have described it accurately, and you are 7, and I am ashamed." And then a voice came out of the house. It came through the wall, through the windows that gave no light back, through the nearly finished array, and it should not have carried, and it carried, as her voice had carried from inside a painting on the first day, dry and clear and 1,000 years deep. And at the sound of it the old man in the garden went very still, the stillness of a man who hears at last, after 50 years, the voice he has crossed his whole life to find. "Hello, Albus," said Rowena Ravenclaw through the wall. "You have grown old. I have been listening to you for some weeks, feeling for my house, and I have wanted to say to you the entire time the single most important thing I will ever say to you, and now you have given me the chance, so attend, because I will say it once. You cannot be trusted with it, not because you are wicked. You are not wicked. I have known wicked. I was friends once with a soul the world calls wicked, and you are not he. You cannot be trusted with it for exactly the reason you have just given the child, which is that you have decided, all by yourself, in the privacy of your own great and lonely mind, what the world needs and who may be trusted with it, and you have decided that the answer is you. You always decide that the answer is you. It is the oldest error there is, Albus, older than the runes, and the clever the mind the harder it bites, and you are the cleverest mind alive, and so it has bitten you to the bone and you cannot even feel the teeth. Dumbledore was silent for a long moment, standing among the dead roses, his head bowed. And the child can be trusted with it instead, he said at last quietly. A boy of 7 alone in a cupboard with a darkness coming. No, said Rowena, he cannot be trusted with it either. No one can. That is the whole of what 1,000 years has taught me, and the whole of what you have refused to learn in your 100 and some. It is not a thing to be trusted to anyone. It is a thing to be taught slowly to one worthy mind at a time, and used to make that mind free and never ever hoarded or secured or kept safe, because a thing kept safe is a thing kept dead, and I have been a thing kept safe, Albus, for 1,000 years by keepers who loved me, and it was a kind of death, and this child, this untaught, half-starved, extraordinary child whom your world left in a cupboard while it told stories about him, is the first person in 1,000 years to make me alive again, by wanting to learn and not to have. That is the difference between you and him, and it is the only difference that has ever mattered, and he is 7, and he understands it, and you are 100 and some, and you do not, and that Albus Dumbledore is my answer, and it is final, and you may force the wall if you like, and the moment you do, every fist of meaning the child and I have cut into this house will close at once, and you will get a painting of a dead woman who knows 400 phrases and a person's favorite color. Because the rest of me will have gone where you cannot follow, and you will have spent 50 years to win a puppet, and you will deserve it. The garden was very quiet. Somewhere beyond the wall, a real bird, an ordinary one, sang 3 notes and stopped. Dumbledore lifted his head and looked at the windows, and then he looked at Harry, and his face had done something that Harry, who read faces for a living, could not entirely follow, because he had never seen it on an adult before. It was the face of a person who has just been told a true thing he does not want to be true and is, against every instinct and every decade of habit, beginning to suspect that it might be. You taught him to refuse me, Dumbledore said. You taught him that being asked kindly by someone who loves him is the most dangerous thing of all. I taught him to refuse everyone, said Rowena, including me, especially me. That is what teaching is, Albus. You have run a school for 50 years and you have forgotten. Now go away and think, which you are better at than any man alive when you can be made to do it, and do not come back until you have understood that the thing you have wanted your whole life was never a thing you were allowed to want. We have work to finish, the child and I, and you are letting the warmth out. Dumbledore went. He did not force the wall. He stood among the dead roses a moment longer, an old man who had been refused, and then he inclined his head once to the house in the manner of a man bowing to an equal, which Harry suspected he had not done to anything in a very long time, and he walked out through the gap in the railings, and the eye of the lane took him, and he was gone, ordinary and forgettable, leaving Harry alone in a garden full of thorns with his heart going hard. He'll come back, Harry said. He will come back, Rowena agreed from within, but not soon and not by force, and not, I think, in the manner you fear. I have given him the one thing his whole long life has trained him to be unable to resist, which is a problem he cannot solve by being cleverer. He will go away and think about it for a long time, and while he thinks, he will not move against us, because Albus Dumbledore's great virtue, the one that has nearly redeemed all his collecting, is that he would genuinely rather be right than be winning, and I have just given him a powerful reason to suspect he has been wrong, and a man like that, given that, becomes the safest enemy in the world for a while. We have bought time again. Come in. We will finish the array tonight, and then I will sleep easier than I have slept since Cassius died, knowing the house cannot be found. So Harry went in, and they worked into the dark, and he cut the last fists of meaning into the plaster by the light of the marble of candle-colored light he could now hold for an hour without thinking, and near midnight Rowena said, "There, it is closed, the house is finished. We are, for the first time in 3 years, genuinely safe," and Harry felt the whole great working settle into place around him with a sensation like a held breath finally let go. The windows going their deepest pond dark, the cold turning kind, the house drawing itself tight and whole against a world that could no longer see it. And that was the moment the wards screamed. It came up through the floor and through the new-cut runes and through the soles of Harry's feet. A wrongness, a tearing, not the gentle, patient pulling of Dumbledore's 50-year hand, but something else entirely. Something that did not feel for the seams but bit at them, ripped at them, a hunger with no patience in it at all, attacking the array from a direction the array had not been built to face, because the array had been built to hide the house from a searcher, and a searcher must first wish to find you. And this thing did not wish to find the house, because this thing already knew exactly where it was. He found it, Harry said, and his voice did not shake because he had spent months learning how to keep it from shaking, and he kept it from shaking now by main force with the floor screaming under him. Crail, he's not searching, he's already here, he's known where it was the whole time. Yes, said Rowena Ravenclaw, and there was no dryness in her voice now, and no grief, only the cold, flat clarity of a general who has heard the first gun. He did not need to find the house, Harry. He only needed to wait until we had finished making it findable to no one else, so that when he came for me there would be no Dumbledore, no ministry, no soul on earth who could even locate the place to come to your aid. We have spent 3 weeks building him a perfect crypt, he let us do. He has been waiting in the dark at the end of the lane, as patient as the kind one and 1,000 times hungrier for us to seal ourselves in. The windows flared with a light that was not candle-colored and was not hers. He is at the gate. Listen to me now, child, and do exactly as I say, because the lessons are over, and the thing they were lessons for has come, and you are 7, and you are the only defense this house has, and that is monstrous, and it is also true, and we are out of time to be anything but ready. Wake the runes, all of them. Tonight you do not hide the house. Tonight you fight from it. Chapter 5 and Chapter 6, The Siege of the Crow House. Wake the runes, Rowena had said, and Harry knelt on the cold floor with both palms flat against the boards and woke them. It was not like the light or the seam or any single working he had done before. It was like being handed the reins of something enormous that had been pretending to be a house. The fists of meaning he had spent 3 weeks cutting into the floor and the walls and the plaster came open all at once under his attention, not in the manner he had been taught, one at a time, gently, but all together, 100 and more, and the whole of it poured up his arms and into the wanting place behind his eyes, here and not seen, and turn aside and forget and hold, and the binding runes lacing them. And for one terrible instant it was more than he had a floor for, and he nearly drowned in his own work. Breathe, said Rowena sharp from the frame. 446, you are not holding the runes. The runes are holding you as the rigging holds the sailor, and a sailor who clutches the rigging falls. Stand inside it, let it carry you. You did not build a weapon, Harry, you built a body, a great slow stone body, and tonight you are going to live in it, and it is going to do what you tell it the same as your hand does without your having to think each finger. Now stop drowning and stand up, because he is at the gate and he is about to knock, and you do not want to be on your knees when he does. Harry stood up, and as he stood, the house stood with him. He felt it in the manner you feel your own height in a low doorway, a sudden knowledge of his own edges, except that his edges were now the gray brick and the pondark windows and the rusted gate and the buried garden paths, all of it his, all of it awake, all of it breathing slowly with his breath. He felt the dead roses in the garden and the lifted tiles in the hall and the cold of the cellar and the iron cover of the coal hole. He felt the chimneys the schoolyard had filled with crows that were not there. He felt at the very edge of himself at the gate, a wrongness, a cold spot in the cold, a place where something stood that the house did not want and could not forget. And the wrongness knocked. It did not knock with a hand. It knocked with a question, laid against the wards as Dumbledore had laid his gentle hand, except that where Dumbledore's question had been, "Where are you, patient and sorry?" this question was open, and it had teeth in it, and it expected to be obeyed. "He's asking the gate to open," Harry said, his voice gone strange and doubled, half a boy and half a house. "Like I ask the wall, he thinks he can ask it like I do. He has spent 30 years learning to ask things to open," said Rowena. "Locks, wards, the seams of stolen workings, the bindings other dead masters set to guard their treasures. He is very good at it. He is the best in the world at it, possibly in this fallen age. And he has never once, in all those 30 years, met a working that was awake, because the keepers always slept their charges, hid them dormant, dead, safe. He is about to ask a sleeping house to open and discover that the house is not asleep, and that it does not like him, and that there is a child standing in the middle of it who has spent 3 weeks learning every door. Tell the gate no, Harry, not loudly, the same as you told Dumbledore." Harry told the gate no. He felt the word go out through the brick and the iron and the dead roses, calm and total. "No, you are not known here, you are not wanted here. This is here and you are not in it." And at the gate the cold wrongness recoiled, surprised, as a hand recoils from a door it expected to be unlocked and finds bolted from inside. There was a silence. And then a voice came up the buried path, pleasant and unhurried and terribly clear, carrying through the November dark the same as Rowena's carried through the wall, the voice of an educated man who has never once in his life been told to wait. "Well," said Magnus Crail, "how interesting, someone is home." Harry had built a picture of Crail out of Hesper's words, and the picture had been a tall, cold collector in a good coat, and the picture was wrong because Hesper had only ever seen the coat and the politeness, and what came up the path now was the thing under both. Crail was not tall, he was narrow and gray and stooped, and he walked with a stick he did not need, and his good coat hung on him as a coat hangs on a chair, because there was not, Harry understood with a lurch, quite enough of a person inside it. That was the wrongness, the cold spot in the cold. Magnus Crail had divided himself so many times, scattered so much of his self into so many stolen anchors, that the part that walked up the path was thin, a man worn to a rind, a candle that has poured most of its wax into other candles and burns now on a guttering stub of wick. His face was courteous and his eyes were patient, and his eyes were also underneath, the eyes of the hungriest thing Harry had ever seen, hungrier than Dudley, hungrier than the winter, a hunger that had eaten so much of its owner that there was almost nothing left but the hunger itself, walking in a good coat, leaning on a stick. A child, said Krail, stopping in the middle of the dead garden, looking up at the pond-dark windows with an expression of mild, delighted surprise. I had wondered. The little thorn could never manage it, poor broken thing, and I confess I had begun to think the working simply would not open for anyone, that I had wasted 3 patient years on a corpse in a frame. But no, someone opened it, someone has been busy. His pale eyes moved across the windows, the gutters, the very air, reading the array Harry had built as Harry read a face, and what came into them was not anger but appetite. And so young, and so gifted. Do you know, in 30 years of this work I have never found a teacher still able to teach, only relics, only the dead lessons in dead things. And here, behind this remarkable little wall, is the only living teacher left in the world, and she has found herself a prodigy and trained him, and the two of them have built me the prettiest trap I have seen in a generation, and walked into it, and pulled the door shut behind them. He smiled, and the smile was the worst thing yet because it was genuinely warm, the warmth of a man contemplating a long-awaited meal. You have made yourselves unfindable, children, to everyone. There is no one coming. You have seen to that yourselves. How thoughtful, how very, very thoughtful. Do not answer him, Rowena said low inside. He is not talking to learn anything. He is talking to make you afraid because fear is a crack, and he means to come in through the crack instead of the wall, since the wall has told him no. Hold the house. Let him talk. Every minute he spends talking is a minute he is not spending breaking, and we want those minutes, Harry. We want every one of them, because there is one person his cleverness has not accounted for, and she does not need to be findable to come, because she already knows the way. Harry held the house and did not answer, and Krail, getting no fear, stopped smiling and got to work. The first blow against the wards was not a blow. It was a persuasion, a long, subtle argument laid against the not-seen runes, an attempt to convince the working that it was tired, that it had hung here 400 years, and was frayed and old and might reasonably rest now, lie down, let go. Harry felt it as a heaviness, a drag, a great seductive weariness pouring in through the windows, and he understood that this was how Krail had unmade the other hidden things, the frost stone and all the rest, not by force but by convincing them to give up, as he had nearly convinced Hesper, the same soft place the kind hand and the hungry hand both worked from, which was another person's despair. He's telling the runes to be tired, Harry said. He's telling them they've done enough. Then tell them they have not, said Rowena. You cut them, they are yours, they will believe you over him, tell them. And Harry, who knew more than any child alive about being told he had done enough and being made to do more, poured into the not-seen runes the one thing he had in endless supply, which was the refusal to be told when he was finished. And the working took heart from him and stiffened and threw the weariness back. And out in the garden Krail staggered half a step, leaning on the stick he did not need. As his own argument came home to him reflected and amplified, you have done enough, lie down, rest. Let go spoke into a man who had poured himself into a dozen jars and had almost nothing left to rest. Oh, said Krail softly, recovering, and the courtesy was gone now, peeled off like the kindness off his face that Hesper had described, leaving the rind and the hunger. Oh, that is clever, he turned my own working, a child turned my working, the pale eyes fixed on the windows with a new and total attention. I will have him too, I think. When I have the founder, I will have the child as well. A mind that can do that at his age would anchor a piece of me for 500 years. He lifted the stick, and it was a wand after all, or had a wand inside it, and the courtesy of the good coat fell entirely away. Enough talking. You are right, little teacher, that I waste my minutes. Let us not waste any more. And he stopped persuading the house and began to break it. The breaking was not subtle and it was not slow, and it was the most frightening thing Harry had ever felt, because it was aimed at him, through the house, through his own edges. Krail struck the wards with something that was not light and not fire and not any clean thing, a grey unmaking, a hunger given a shape and thrown, and where it struck the array the runes did not merely strain, they screamed, and Harry screamed with them, because they were his edges now and the unmaking was eating his edges, and he tasted blood and the cold study tilted, and Rowena's voice came through the tilting like a rope thrown to a drowning sailor. You cannot meet it head-on, she said, fast and flat. You are 7 and he is 30 years of theft, and you will lose a contest of strength, so we do not have a contest of strength. Give ground, listen to me. A house is not a fortress. A fortress is a stupid thing, a thing that can only stand or fall. A house has rooms and doors and a cellar and stairs, and you know every one of them and he knows none. Let him in the front. Let him break the gate. Let him have the garden. Let him have the hall. Pull yourself back room by room, and as you go, close the runes behind you, so that every room he wins becomes a room he is trapped in the moment he leaves it. You are not defending the house, Harry. You are spending it. You are trading him brick for time, and time is the one thing we need. So Harry gave ground. He let the gate go. It tore off its rusted hinges with a shriek of metal, and Krail came through, leaning on his stick, unhurried, into a garden that was no longer hiding anything. And behind him, silent, the runes at the gate closed, so that the gate became a place that could be entered and not left, a one-way valve cut in the fabric of where things are. He let the front door go, the drowned plum door bursting inward off its frame, and let Crail into the hall with the lifted tiles, and behind him sealed the threshold. And Crail walked deeper into a house that was quietly, methodically becoming a fist closing around him, one finger at a time, and did not notice because he had eyes only for the wall under the stairs, the wall with the founder behind it, the prize, the thing 30 years had been spent to reach. And that was when Hesper Thorne came over the broken gate. Harry felt her before he saw her, felt the gate that had become a one-way valve admit a second body into the garden, a warm body, a known one, the keeper's blood that the house had loved for 1,000 years even though the gift had skipped it, and his doubled buoyant house voice cracked. "No," he said. "No, no, she can't be here, tell her to go back, she can't get past the inner wall, she'll be stuck in the hall with him." "She knows that," said Rowena, and her voice was terrible. "She has always known that, she has come anyway, of course she has come anyway. She has stood at that wall for 3 years unable to open it, and now there is a thing on the other side of it worth dying in front of, and she is a thorn, and the thorns have died in front of that wall for 1,000 years, and it is the one duty the gift never had to come along to let her do. We cannot send her back. The gate is a one-way valve, you closed it, she cannot leave any more than he can. Let her do what she came to do, Harry, and do not let it break your aim, because she did not come here to be saved. She came here to buy you a minute, and you are going to spend that minute well, or you are going to waste her, and there is no third thing." Crail was halfway across the hall, picking through the lifted tiles toward the understairs wall, when Hesper Thorne stepped through the broken front door behind him with her grandfather's wand in one fist and in the other, gripped white-knuckled, a fist-sized lump of gray stone on a leather thong, and she said in the flat northern voice with all the soft vowels filed off, "Magnus Crail." He turned, unhurried, almost fond. "The little Thorne, I did wonder where you'd got to. Come to watch, have you? Come to see the thing your family kept from me at last given a proper use. Come to tell you something my granddad worked out," said Hesper, "before your sort frightened him into his grave. He couldn't open the door either. The gift skipped him too, near enough. It's been thinning in the thorns for 5 generations. But he wasn't useless, and neither am I, because a keeper doesn't need to do magic. A keeper needs to carry it." She lifted the gray stone on its thong, and it was not glowing. It did nothing a stone in a story would do, and yet the cold in the hall changed around it, deepened, gathered. "This is a keeper's knot, last thing he made me. It doesn't cast, and it doesn't ward, and it doesn't do one blessed clever thing. All it does is hold a person where they're standing for a count of 60 once, and then it's spent, and so's the keeper that triggers it, because it runs on what's left of the blood, and there's not much left in me, so it'll likely be the last thing I do." She closed her hand around it. "I've been saving it 3 years for the right doorstep. Turns out this is it." "Hesper, don't," Harry started, in the house's voice, in the air of the hall, and she did not even look toward the wall. "Mind your lessons, love," said Hesper Thorne. "I'll mind mine." And she crushed the keeper's knot in her fist. It did exactly what she had said, no more and no less, which was the most Thorne thing about it. There was no light and no thunder. There was simply a moment in which Magnus Crail, halfway through turning back toward the understairs wall, stopped, held where he stood by the last of a dying line's blood, his thin gray body locked, his stick frozen at half-lift, his pale, hungry eyes the only part of him still able to move, and they moved, and they fixed on Hesper Thorne with an expression of such pure administrative irritation, as at an unexpected delay, that it would have been funny on any other night. 60 seconds, Hesper said, and she was already swaying, already graying, the knot having taken its price out of her the moment she paid it. Use them. And then she folded down onto the lifted tiles of the hall, not dead. Harry could feel that she was not dead, but emptied, the little that the gift had left in her spent entirely on holding a monster still for the length of a held breath, and she lay among the broken tiles in front of the wall she had spent 3 years unable to open and could not get up. 60 seconds, said Rowena, and there was no time now for anything but the work. She has bought you the war, Harry, he is held. He cannot break the house and he cannot reach me, not for 60 seconds, and in 60 seconds we cannot win because he is still scattered, still a dozen jars, and a held man scattered is still unkillable. So we do not waste the 60 seconds trying to kill him. We waste them preparing the moment that can. Listen. The instant the knot releases him, he will not waste a breath. He will come straight to the wall and I will open it for him and he will begin the harvest because that is what he is, a hunger that cannot stop reaching even when reaching is the trap. And to harvest me he must gather himself whole. That is the moment. You know the rest. We spoke of it. I will not say it again with the clock running. Stand in your corner. Light the front room, the true one, the frightened one with the blade behind it. And when his pieces come home and his eyes are on me, you do the first thing I ever taught you, and you do not hesitate, and you do not be kind, because kindness tonight is a thing you can only afford after. Hesper's hurt, Harry said. His voice shook now, and he let it because there was no one left in the hall to fool. She's down, I can feel her. She's down and she can't get up, and it's because of me, because she came for me. She came for her, said Rowena, gentle and merciless. For the thing in the frame her family died for 1,000 years. You do not get to make her sacrifice about you. That would be a theft, and we have had enough theft in this house tonight. Honor her by spending it. Grieve her after. There is no after if you grieve her now. Stand in your corner." Harry stood in his corner. The 60 seconds ran out, and Magnus Krail came off Hesper Thorns holding like a man stepping out of a doorway, smooth and unhurried, as though the minute had been an inconvenience and not a defeat. And he did not look down at the woman emptied on the tiles, did not so much as step around her with courtesy, but over her, and crossed to the wall under the stairs and laid both thin gray hands flat against the paneled oak. "Open," he said. And Rowena opened it because she wanted him in, and the wall became a doorway with no movement the eye could catch, and Krail stepped through into the cold, tall study and saw her at last, the living portrait, the wisdom of Rowena, the prize of 30 hungry years, and his worn gray face came alight with a joy so pure and so terrible that Harry, pressed small and frightened into the corner where she had told him to stand, nearly broke and ran. "There you are," Krail breathed and crossed the study toward the frame, and did not so much as glance at the child in the corner because the child was a sweet for after and the woman was the feast. "There you are, 1,000 years. I have read every account, chased every rumor, killed, I will be honest, a number of dull and undeserving people, and none of it prepared me for the fact of you. You are awake, you are whole. Do you know what you are worth?" "I know exactly what I am worth," said Rowena Ravenclaw, "which is more than you can carry, and you are going to try to carry it anyway, because that is the whole of what you are, a hunger that has eaten its own hands and reaches still. Go on then, antiquary. You have come a long way and stepped over a brave woman to get here, and you have a stub of a wick where your soul should be. Do not let an old woman's chatter delay your supper." And Krail, who had spent 30 years learning to ask things to open, set down his stick and set down, one by one in the air around him, the jars of himself, the dozen scattered anchors he carried always at the edge of his being, and called them home. Harry felt it happen. He felt the cold spot in the cold gather and thicken and become, for the first time, a whole man, terribly whole, every stolen piece brought back and held in two reaching hands and pressed against the founder's frame. And he felt Krail open himself, mind to mind, naked and undivided, and lay the gray unmaking edge of himself against the binding that held Rowena's 1,000-year mind to the paint, and begin, with a connoisseur's exquisite care, to cut. Rowena screamed. It was the first sound of pain Harry had ever heard from her, and it was real, and it nearly finished him because it was his teacher, the only person who had ever thought his mind was worth anything, and she was being unmade in front of him by a thing in a good coat, and every instinct he had, the old hot instinct that had turned a wig blue and vanished glass at the zoo, surged up to throw raw power across the room, to burn, to break, to fail. He did not, he breathed. 446, with his teacher screaming and the cold study filling with gray unmaking light and Hesper emptied on the tiles in the hall behind him, he breathed, and he let the hot useless light go, and he reached instead for the oldest art, the first thing she had ever taught him, and he read Magnus Krail. He read a man gathered whole for the first time in 30 years. He read under the joy and the appetite and the connoisseur's care, the thing the dividing had done, the thing no amount of stolen life could mend. A self torn along a dozen seams that had never been meant to part, held together by nothing now but a clenched and shrieking will, a will that had not rested in 3 decades, because resting, for Krail, meant flying apart, meant the pieces remembering they were pieces and going home to the dark. He read a creature so tired underneath the hunger, so unspeakably tired, that the tiredness was the largest thing in it, larger than the appetite, larger than what little was left of the person, a tiredness 1,000 stolen years could never fill, because it was not a tiredness of the body, it was the tiredness of a thing held forcibly together against its own deepest wish to stop. And Harry, who knew that tiredness, who had felt the smaller cousin of it every night of his life in the cupboard and had refused it every morning, looked at it without flinching, and felt no triumph and no fear, only the enormous still pity of one exhausted creature recognizing another, and into the seam of Magnus Krail's gathered and naked and undivided self. In the moment his eyes were full of Rowena and his hands were full of the cut. Harry spoke. He did not say it aloud. He said it the way you tell a wall to be a door, the way you tell a gate no, mind to mind, a fist of meaning closed and complete and meant with the whole of him. You've done enough, you can stop now, you can rest, let go, and he meant it. That was the thing Rowena had known and Krail had never imagined. That the child in the corner was the one creature on earth who could say those 4 sentences and mean them all the way down, not as a trick, not as a weapon, but as the truth, the actual mercy of them. The rest, that the tired thing had been forbidden for 30 years and wanted more than it wanted the founder, more than it wanted to live, more than it had ever in all its hunger let itself want anything. Magnus Krail heard let go spoken truly by someone who understood exactly what it cost, and he let go. It was not violent. That was the most terrible thing about it and the most merciful. The clenched will that had held a dozen torn pieces together for 30 years simply, finally unclenched, the way a fist unclenches when the arm at last gives out. and the pieces of Magnus Krail remembered that they were pieces, and they went home, all of them, all at once, flying back out of the gathered hole and into the dark from which no stolen anchor could now call them, because the calling had stopped, because Krail himself had set down the weight, because a child in a corner had told him he could. And he had believed it because it was true. The good coat fell empty to the floor of the study with a sound like a sigh. The stick rolled. The gray, unmaking light went out as though it had never been lit. And the study was quiet and cold, and Rowena Ravenclaw was still in her frame, whole, the binding holding, the cut closed an instant before it would have parted forever. And Harry was on his knees on the boards with blood on his face and his teacher's name in his throat, and he had not burned anything, and he had not broken anything, and the greatest magic of his life had left no mark that it was magic at all, exactly as she had taught him on the 4th day of his life as her student. When the loudest thing in his world had been Dudley's ice cream. "Harry," said Rowena, and her voice was not steady, and she did not pretend it was. "Look at me, are you whole? Answer me." "He's gone," Harry said. His voice came from very far away. "I told him he could rest, and he wanted to so much. He wanted to for 30 years. Something was happening in his chest that he had no name for and did not want one. I didn't kill him, I just stopped holding him up. He'd been holding himself up so long, and I told him he didn't have to anymore, and he—" "I know," said Rowena. "I know what you did, I know what it cost. We will not pretend it cost nothing. That is what Dumbledore would do, and we are not him. You ended a thing that needed ending with the cleanest hand any executioner ever brought to the work, with mercy instead of fire, and it will sit in you a long time, and I will sit in it with you every day for as long as you will have me." Her painted eyes moved past him, toward the broken doorway in the wrecked hall beyond, where a woman lay emptied among the lifted tiles. "But not this minute, go to the girl." Harry went to Hesper. She was breathing. He could see it now as well as feel it, the shallow, careful breaths of a person who has spent everything and is deciding moment by moment whether to keep going, and her eyes were open and fixed on the ceiling of the wrecked hall. And when his shadow fell across her they came round to him, slow, the irises gone pale and strange, the price of the keepers not written all through her like frost through an orchard. "Did it work?" she said. It was barely a voice. "It worked," Harry said. "You held him, you bought the whole thing." "He's gone, Hesper. He's not coming back, not ever. There's nothing left of him to come back. You did it." He did not know what to do with his hands. No one had ever taught him what to do with his hands at a moment like this, so he did the thing he had invented from nothing, the thing he had done for Rowena, and he stayed, and did not look away, and let it be as big as it needed to be. "You stood in front of the door, you said you would, and you did." 3 years, Hesper breathed, and something moved at the corner of her gray mouth that on a better day would have been a smile. 3 years I stood at that wall and couldn't open it, and tonight I finally did something at it worth a damn, and I never had to open it at all. Her pale eyes drifted toward the understairs wall, the doorway standing open now onto the cold study and the frame within. "Is she there? Can I, after all this, can I see her?" "You're already past the wall," Harry said, working it out aloud as he always did, his throat tight. "It's open. Krail's gone through it and I never closed it. You can see her. You're in the hall, the wall's just there, you can." And then he understood and stopped, because Hesper Thorne, who had spent her whole life and her whole line's strength unable to cross that threshold, could not now cross the 4 feet of broken tile to reach it, because the knot had taken her legs along with everything else. So Harry did the only thing left. He took the painting off the wall. He had never touched her frame but the once, on the first day, the rune at the bottom. And lifting her now, the black wood carved with leaves and eyes and the letters cut before England, he felt the whole vast holding of her settle into his small arms, lighter than it had any right to be, the weight of 1,000 years carrying itself, and he turned her so that she faced the hall, and he knelt and held her low, where a woman lying on broken tiles could see, and Rowena Ravenclaw looked out of her frame at the last of the line that had hidden her for 1,000 years. The granddaughter who had wept at her wall and could never open it and had tonight lain down in front of it instead. "Hesper Thorne," said Rowena, and there was no dryness in it at all. "Cassius's girl. You have your grandfather's chin and his foolish, stubborn, magnificent heart, and you spent the last of 1,000 years of keepers' blood to hold a monster still in a doorway, and I am looking at you now, which your family bled for 10 centuries to make impossible, and I find I have nothing cutting to say, which has happened to me precisely twice this year, and both times in this house, and both times because of the people in it." Her painted voice gentle to something Harry had never heard. "Thank you. For all of them, for every thorn who hid me and ran with me and died at my wall without ever once being allowed to see what they were dying for. Rest now, child, you have done enough, you are allowed." And Hesper Thorne, hearing the same 4 words Harry had used to end a monster, but spoken to her in love and not in mercy-killing, closed her pale eyes and breathed and did not stop breathing, and the corner of her mouth finished the smile it had been trying to make for 3 years. He did not get up. He knelt there on the broken tiles with the painting cradled low and Hesper breathing slow beside him, and he let himself, for the first time since the wards had screamed, simply be where he was and feel it. The house was hurt. He could still feel it, the great slow stone body he had lived inside all night, and it was wounded the way a body is wounded after a fight it has won. The gate torn from its hinges, the door burst, the array ripped open from threshold to frame, the runes he had cut over 3 weeks hanging slack and spent and bleeding their meaning out into the November dark. It would mend, he knew that now, as he knew the seam had taken heart from the array, a house cared for men's. But it would carry the scars, and he would feel them, every one, for as long as he kept it, the way you feel an old break in the cold, and he understood that this was simply what it was to keep a thing. You took its wounds into yourself and called them yours because they were. And the coat, the empty coat on the study floor, beyond the broken doorway where Magnus Crail had been. Harry made himself look at it. He had been taught on the very first day not to look away, and he did not look away now, though everything in him wanted to, because the coat was the shape of what he had done, and what he had done sat in his chest like a swallowed stone, cold and exact, and would, he understood, sit there a long time. "You are deciding whether you are a murderer," said Rowena from the frame in his arms, not as a question. "I told him he could rest," Harry said. His voice had gone very small. He wanted to so much that he stopped. "I didn't throw anything, I didn't hurt him, I just told him the truth, and the truth killed him." He swallowed against the cold stone. "If telling someone the truth kills them, is that the same as killing them? I keep trying to work it out and I can't make it come out the same twice." "It will not come out the same twice for the rest of your life," said Rowena, "and the day it comes out easy is the day you have become something I would not want to teach. Listen to me, because this matters more than any rune. You did not kill a man tonight, Harry. There was no man left to kill. He had spent himself to Rhine decades ago, and what walked up my path was a hunger wearing a coat, held together against its own deepest wish by nothing but a will that had forgotten how to stop. You did not destroy him, you released him. You gave a creature an unending pain, the one thing it had been forbidden and craved above its own survival, and you gave it not in cruelty and not in fear, but in a pity so exact that it could only have come from a child who knew that pain from the inside and refused it every morning of his life." Her painted eyes held his. "And you are right that it is not nothing. A clean killing is still a killing, and mercy is still a weight, and you will carry it, and I will help you carry it, and we will never, ever pretend together that it weighed nothing, because pretending a heavy thing is light is how people like Crail begin. The stone in your chest is the proof that you are not him. Keep it. Do not let anyone, not me, not the old man who is coming, talk you out of it. It is the most valuable thing you own tonight." Harry nodded slowly and did not let the stone go, and found that holding it instead of trying to put it down made it possible to keep breathing around it. Then he felt the beacon. He had been so deep in the coat and the stone and his teacher's voice that he had half forgotten the thing she had warned him of, and now it came back up through the torn floor and the slack runes. The house, broken open, was no longer hiding. The great concealment he had spent 3 weeks building had been the thing that made it findable to no one, and the great concealment was in ribbons, and through the ribbons the raw old magic of the place was pouring out into the night, unhidden, unmuffled, screaming its 1,000-year heartbeat across the whole sleeping south of England like a struck bell that would not stop ringing. Anyone with the ears for it would hear. And there was in all the world exactly one set of ears that had spent 50 years tuned to precisely this note. "He's coming," Harry said. The stone in his chest had company now, a colder and a quicker thing. "Dumbledore, he'll have felt it. The whole house is shouting where it is. I can't stop it. I haven't got anything left. I can barely hold the painting." "No," said Rowena. "You cannot stop it, and you will not try, because trying would empty the last of you and leave you unable to do the one thing tonight still requires, which is to think. He is coming. We knew he would eventually. Tonight has only changed eventually into now. So we will not waste the minutes we have left on a wall we cannot raise. We will spend them as we spent the siege, getting ready for the moment that matters." Her voice was steady, and underneath the steadiness was the thing he had heard only twice, the not-quite steadiness she let him hear because she had decided, somewhere in these months, that he was owed her truth and not only her command. "You are about to be more tired and more alone than you have ever been, with the prize of a great man's whole life lying undefended in your arms and no strength left to defend it. And you are going to win anyway, Harry, not with magic because you have none left, but with the first thing I ever taught you and the truest thing you own. So breathe, 446. And do not put me down, whatever he says, because a child holding a thing he loves is a harder thing to take it from than a child who has set it on the floor, and the old man, for all his power, is not made of stone, and we are going to find out tonight exactly what he is made of instead." It was into that, the child kneeling on the broken tiles holding a 1,000-year-old founder low so that an emptied woman could see her, the empty coat in the study, the wards torn open from gate to frame and screaming themselves out across the south of England like a struck bell, that the footsteps came. They were unhurried and terribly gentle, picking their way through the ruin of the hall, and Harry knew them before the speaker reached the broken door, because he had heard them once before on a path among dead roses, and he had known then that the walking was the most dangerous thing the speaker did. "Hello, Harry," said Albus Dumbledore from the wrecked doorway. His eyes were not on the child and not on the woman on the tiles, though they took in both and grieved both in passing. They were on the painting in Harry's arms, on the living face of Rowena Ravenclaw, and they were wet, and they were the eyes of a man looking at last upon the thing he had crossed his whole long life to find. I felt it from 200 miles away, the moment the wards opened. I came as fast as an old man can come, and I see I came too late to spare you any of it, and I am more sorry for that than I have words to say. He stepped into the hall through the broken door into the cold, and his gaze never once left the frame in the child's arms. And I see I came in time for the rest. The house lies open. The defenses are spent. The girl can barely breathe, and you, Harry, are a 7-year-old who has just done a terrible and necessary thing and has nothing left in him, and you are holding in your two thin arms, undefended, in the open, the one thing I have wanted since before your parents were born. He folded his hands. The blue eyes came at last to Harry's face, and they were kind, and they were steel, and they were sorry, and they were not leaving. So, said Albus Dumbledore very gently, let us, you and I, talk about what happens now. Chapter 6 and Chapter 7, What the World Forgot and What One Boy Remembered. So, said Albus Dumbledore very gently, let us, you and I, talk about what happens now. Harry knelt on the broken tiles of the hall with the painting held low in his arms and Hesper Thorne breathing slow and shallow at his side. And he did not stand up, because standing up would have meant putting Rowena down. And he was not going to put Rowena down, not in front of this old man, not while the wards lay open and the house lay spent, and there was nothing left between the prize of 50 years, and the hand that wanted it but a 7-year-old too tired to make a light. So he stayed kneeling, and he held her, and he said the only true thing he had. You're going to take her, aren't you? You said you came in time for the rest. That's what the rest is. I can't stop you. I've got nothing left. Hesper's got nothing left. The house is open. You waited for tonight on purpose, didn't you? You let Crail do the breaking. You knew if you came while the walls were up I'd say no and mean it, so you waited until I couldn't. Something crossed the old man's face, and it was not denial. You are very tired, said Dumbledore, and you have done a terrible thing tonight beautifully, and tired children who have done terrible things are owed gentleness, so I am going to give you the truth instead, because in my experience the two are very often the same thing. Yes, I felt the wards fail. I could have come a day ago and laid siege to your defenses myself, and I did not, because I knew you would resist me, and I did not wish to be the sort of man who breaks a child's wall. He paused, and the blue eyes did not leave the frame. And yes, I knew that if I waited, the night might come when those walls fell to someone with fewer scruples than I have, and that I might then arrive, regretful and too late to spare you, and find the thing I have wanted undefended in your arms. I did not plan it, but I confess, Harry, that I did not pray very hard against it either. And a man who will not pray against a thing he wants has already half decided to take it. Your teacher told me as much in the garden, and I have spent the days since being angry at her for being right, which is the surest sign a thing is right that I know. Then take it, said Rowena Ravenclaw from the frame in Harry's arms, and her painted voice was steady now, steadier than it had been through the whole siege. Go on, Albus, the child cannot stop you, the girl cannot stop you, I cannot stop you, I am a painting, I have no hands, I never had a wand. You are the most powerful wizard alive, and you have arranged matters, by patience and by the daily cowardice of not praying against your own desire, so that there is no one and nothing in this ruined house with the strength to keep you from carrying me out of it. So do it, I will not even make it difficult. I will simply tell you while you do it exactly what you are taking so that you cannot pretend afterward you did not know. Dumbledore did not move. I am 1,000 years of the lost arts, said Rowena. I am wardcraft your ministry could not dream, and mind arts your aurors fumble at, and the runes cut before your England, and the whole theory of the binding of mind to matter, the clean of it and the black. I am everything you have spent your life trying to rebuild from the corpses of books, alive and whole, and able to answer the question you did not know to ask, and I am useless to you, entirely. Do you understand that, Albus? You may carry me to your tower and hang me on your wall and sit before me every night for the rest of your long life, and I will not teach you one single thing, because you do not want to learn. You want to have. You have wanted to have since you were younger than this child, and it cost you a sister, did it not, and a friend, and you have spent 100 years building a self so kind and so careful around that wanting that you have nearly fooled even yourself. But you have not fooled me, because I made the art of seeing what is under the kindness, and I see what is under yours, and it is the same hunger that walked up my path tonight in a worse man's coat. Crail wanted to use me to live forever. You want to use me to be safe, and the only difference between you in the end is that his hunger ate him hollow and yours has merely made you lonely, and I will teach a hollow man and a lonely man precisely the same number of things, which is none, because neither of you came to learn. The hall was very quiet. Hesper Thorne's shallow breathing was the loudest thing in it. That is a hard judgment, said Dumbledore at last softly, from a woman who chose to become a painting rather than trust the world with what she knew. It is, said Rowena, and I have had 1,000 years to test it, and it has not cracked, and do you know what finally taught me it was true? Him. She did not gesture, she could not, but Harry felt the whole of her attention turn in the frame in his arms toward him. This child, who walked into my house with coal on his teeth and asked nothing of me but to be taught, who has had less than anyone I have ever met, less than the burned children we built the school to save, less than your hungry collector, less than you, and who has never once, in all the months I have known him, tried to have me. He wanted the light, then he wanted the runes. He wanted to know, Albus, and wanting to know is the opposite of wanting to have. It is the one hunger that grows you instead of shrinking you, and it is the rarest thing in the world, and you have spent 50 years hunting a painting, while the only vessel that could ever have actually held what I know was being born in a cupboard 9 streets from 100 wizards who never looked twice. Her voice did not rise. You cannot take what I know, Albus Dumbledore, you never could. You can only take the painting, and if you take the painting, you take it away from the one person in 1,000 years who can make it mean anything, and you condemn it to be exactly what you fear it becoming in the wrong hands, a dead and hoarded thing, a corpse of knowledge, a fossil on a great man's wall. You will not be stealing me from Crail. Crail is gone. You will be stealing me from him. And you will have to do it while he kneels there holding me, having just saved my existence with the cleanest piece of magic you will see in your life, and you will have to look at his face while you do it. So, I have told you what you're taking. The child is too tired to fight you. Reach out your hand. Dumbledore looked at the painting for a long moment, and then slowly he looked at Harry. Harry met the blue eyes, and he did not build a front room, and he did not fold anything small, and he did not hide. He had no strength left to hide, and he realized no wish to. He simply let the old man look at him, all of him, the exhaustion and the grief and the thing he had done to Crail that would sit in him for years, and underneath all of it the one fact Rowena had named, the wanting to know that had never once been a wanting to have, lit plain at the front where it could be found. She's right, Harry said. His voice was small and steady. You can take her, I can't stop you. But I worked something out this whole time learning from her, and it's the thing she taught me first before any of the magic, and it's this. Letting someone see a thing isn't the same as giving it to them. I thought it was my whole life. I thought if you saw me, you'd taken me. But you can show someone your whole self and keep your whole self. He drew a breath, 446, slow. So even if you take the painting, you won't have her. You'll have a thing she's looking out of. And even if you take everything she taught me, you can't, because it's in me now. It's not in a book or a frame. It's the way I think, and you'd have to take my head off to get it. And you won't, because you're not Crail. You said so yourself on the bench. You'd rather be right than be winning. He looked up. You came here to take a thing because you're scared of a darkness that's coming. She told me about it. The thing that's asleep that'll wake up, and maybe you're right that it's coming. But if you take her, you'll have spent 50 years in the last of an old woman's hope to win a painting that won't talk to you, and when the darkness comes, you'll meet it with a corpse on your wall and a kid in a cupboard who'll never trust you again. Or, he stopped. Dumbledore waited. Even Rowena was silent. Or you leave her here, Harry said, with me, and Hesper when she's better, and you go away and you think, like she said, because you're good at thinking when someone makes you. And maybe when I'm older, when the darkness comes, you've got something better than a painting. You've got a person who learned the lost magic properly, slowly, the way it's meant to be learned, who's on the same side as you because he chose to be and not because you collected him. You can't have that. You can only grow it. And growing it means leaving it here in a wrecked house at the end of a lane, with a 7-year-old you could overpower in a second, and trusting that the 7-year-old turns into someone worth not having overpowered. He held the old man's eyes. She says you can't do that. She says you always decide the answer is you. I think she might be wrong about you. I hope she's wrong about you. Because I'd rather you were the kind of person I hoped about than the kind I was right about, and I don't get to know which until you decide. The hall was silent for a long, long time. And Albus Dumbledore, who had wanted the wisdom of Rowena since before he had a beard, who had questioned a herbwife to her death and built silver instruments to listen for a heartbeat in the south and waited 50 years and not prayed against his own desire, stood in the ruin of a house at the end of Old Mill Lane and was, for perhaps the first time in a century, beaten, not by a stronger hand, because there was no stronger hand in the room, but by a child who had handed him away to be better than he was and dared him to take it. His eyes, when Harry looked into them, did the thing he had seen on the bench, the thing under the prepared sorrow that had not been arranged. And then slowly the old man lowered himself, joints and robes and all, until he was kneeling too on the broken tiles, eye to eye with a child holding a painting, an old man kneeling in the wreckage as he had not knelt to anything in living memory. You are quite right, said Albus Dumbledore, that I do not get to know which I am until I decide, and you are quite right that I have always, all my life, decided that the answer is me. He was quiet. I am going to decide differently tonight. Not because I am certain it is wise, I am not. The darkness is real, and I am afraid of it, and a wiser head than mine might tell me I am gambling the safety of the world on the character of a 7-year-old, and he might be right. But I have spent 100 years being the one who decides he is the answer, and it cost me everyone I loved, and tonight a child I came to rob has offered me, instead of the thing I wanted, the chance to be a different man, and I find that I want that more than I have wanted anything in 50 years, which is, I think, what your teacher has been trying to tell me through a wall, and what I have been too clever and too frightened to hear. He bowed his head to the frame. Rowena, I will not take you. I have wanted you my whole life, and I will leave you here in a wrecked house with a child, and I will go away and think, as you instructed, and I will try to become a man who can be trusted with the thing precisely by never again trying to take it. It is the only proof of trustworthiness there is it not, the not taking?" "It is," said Rowena Ravenclaw, and her painted voice had gone very quiet. "It is the only proof there is, and you are the first man in 1,000 years to offer it to me. And I find, Albus, that I may have been very slightly wrong about you, which I will deny if you repeat it, and which you should treasure, because I have been wrong about a person perhaps 4 times since the conquest, and I have apologized for it never." Dumbledore stayed until dawn, which surprised Harry, and helped, which surprised him more. He did not help with magic at first. He helped by sitting on the broken tiles of the hall with a wounded woman's head pillowed on his folded mac, an old man in his shirt sleeves, and talking to Hesper Thorne in a low, steady voice about nothing in particular. Her grandfather's people, the beekeeping families of the north, an orchard he had walked through once near her village before she was born, keeping her tethered to the world, while the worst of the keeper's not frost worked its slow way out of her blood. He knew healing, it turned out, the real kind, the patient kind that Helga had used a wand for at the end, and he did what could be done, which was not to mend her because she had spent something that does not mend, but to make sure that what was left of her settled into a shape she could live in. "She will not do magic again," he told Harry quietly near morning, while Hesper slept a real sleep at last with a little color come back into her face. "She had little enough, and she spent the last of it on the knot, but she will live, and she will mend in every way that matters, and she will be, I think, a most formidable guardian of this place, which she could never have been while the gift was a wound she kept picking at. A squib who has saved the world with a stone in a doorway has very little left to prove to anyone, least of all herself." He looked at the sleeping woman with something close to envy. "There is a freedom in it, Harry, that you and I will never have. The freedom of having done the one necessary thing and being done. You and I are the other sort. We will be doing necessary things until we die. I am sorry for it. It is the price of the gift, and no one tells you at 11 that it is a price." Then, as the gray November light came up through the pond-dark windows that no longer hid anything, the two of them rebuilt the house. It was the strangest lesson Harry ever had, and the only one he ever shared with anyone but Rowena, and he never told a soul about it for the rest of his life. Dumbledore knew wardcraft, real wardcraft, more than anyone alive except the painting, and the painting, who had spent the night deciding she had been wrong about him, taught them both all morning, her 1,000-year voice and his 100-year hands and Harry's 7-year-old fists of meaning braided together over the wreckage, here and not seen and forget. The gate rehung, the door remade, the seam in the floor knit whole and strengthened. The great concealment relayed deeper and truer than Cassius Thorne had ever managed. Harry watched the old man work and learned more in one morning of watching than in a week of any ordinary lesson, because Dumbledore's hands knew 100 small economies the painting had never thought to teach, the little efficiencies a living wizard discovers across a long life of actually doing the thing, and the painting watched him too, through Harry's eyes, and twice said, "Oh, that is neat. Where did you learn that?" in a voice of pure professional appetite, and twice Dumbledore answered. And once asked her a question in return that she had to think about for a full minute before answering, and Harry understood that he was witnessing the thing Rowena had said could never happen, 2 great minds teaching each other instead of trying to own each other, and that it was happening because of a choice an old man had made on his knees in the dark. By noon the Crow House stood once more at the end of Old Mill Lane, unfindable, unbreakable, a ward persuaded to look like a ruin, with the difference that this time it had been built by 3 people who had chosen to build it together, and a working built in trust, Rowena said, is stronger than a working built in fear, by exactly the margin that the people in it are worth. Dumbledore found Harry alone in the garden afterward, among the thorny ropes of the dead roses, where Harry had gone to stand in the cold and be, for a moment, not in any room with anyone watching. "I am going to go now," the old man said. "I will keep your teacher's 3 conditions. You may tell her so, though she will pretend she had no doubt. But before I go, I find I owe you something, and an old man who has just learned, at my age, how to leave a thing untaken ought to practice his new skill at once before he forgets the trick of it, so I shall give you a thing instead of taking one, which is the opposite exercise, and I suspect the harder." Harry waited. He had learned that the waiting was where the truth lived. "I am not going to tell you about your parents today," said Dumbledore. "You are 7, and you have had enough truth for one November, and the truth of your parents is large, and it is owed to you whole, not in pieces on a cold morning. But I am going to tell you one true thing about them, so that you carry it, and it is this. Your mother had your eyes, exactly your eyes, the green of them, and she had also the thing your teacher has named in you, the wanting to know that never curdled into wanting to have, and it was the most remarkable thing about her in a life full of remarkable things, and she died in part because she would not stop wanting to protect what she loved rather than wanting to possess it, which is the same hunger turned outward, the only good direction it has." He was quiet. "You did not get that from a painting, Harry. You got it from her. The painting has only watered what was already planted. I thought you should know that the soil was good before any of us touched it." Harry stood very still in the cold garden holding that, as he held everything that was too large for the front of a sentence, and he did not say thank you, because thank you was a word people used to make a moment end, and he did not want this one to end, and Dumbledore, who understood that better than most, did not wait for it. "When you are 11, the old man said, a letter will come, and a half-giant with a kind heart and a loud voice will be sent to fetch you to castle. And you will pretend, I think, to be a child who has never heard of magic, and you will be sorted, and you will let the world believe it is teaching you everything for the first time, and you will be, for some years, the most quietly dangerous student that school has held since its founders walked its halls. I will know what you are. You will know that I know. And we will say nothing, you and I, and we will both watch the darkness come, and when it comes we will meet it together, the collector who learned to leave things untaken and the orphan who learned the magic the world forgot, and I think, Harry, I genuinely think we may give it the surprise of its long, unnatural life." He smiled, and this time there was no steel in it that Harry could find, only the warmth and a tiredness that was almost peace. "Until then, mind the dog and the snicket. And do occasionally be a child. Your teacher will not think to tell you that, because she has forgotten she was one. I have not. It is the one advantage age has over a painting." And he walked out through the rehung gate, and the eye of the lane took him, ordinary and forgettable. An old man the world slid off, and Harry stood among the dead roses until the cold drove him in, carrying a fact about his mother's eyes that he would keep, like the coin sewn into the coat, for the rest of his life. The weeks after were the strangest of Harry's life, because nothing happened, and the nothing was the most extraordinary thing that had ever happened to him. No one came. The wards held the house was unfindable. Crail was gone past calling back, and Dumbledore kept his 3 conditions and did not return uninvited, though twice a snowy owl Harry did not recognize left a wrapped parcel of books inside the rehung gate, hard old volumes on the theory of wards with a card that said only for the keeper of the house, from a student of it with respect, and Rowena read the spines through Harry's eyes and said, "He is showing me his homework. The cheek of him. Keep them 2 are wrong and 1 is brilliant, and you will learn more from finding which is which than from any lesson I could give you." Hesper mendied in the ways that mattered. She could not do magic any more, and she did not seem to grieve it. The gift had been a held wound her whole life, and the spending of it had cauterized something, and what was left was a tart, dry, formidable woman with gray-streaked hair and pale, strange eyes who moved into the front rooms of the Crow House, the parts that were only a house and not a ward, and made them habitable and kept the kettle on, and learned, without the gift, all the other 1,000 things a keeper does, the watching of the lane, the reading of the books. The long, patient guardianship that her family had done for 1,000 years, and that, it turned out, had never actually required magic at all, only love and a stubborn unwillingness to leave a post. She and Rowena settled into something that was not friendship, exactly, the lofty 1,000-year-old founder and the flat northern squib, and was sharper and warmer than friendship, an argument that never ended, in that both of them, Harry slowly understood, looked forward to the way other people look forward to a meal. "Your hair's a disgrace," Hesper told him, the first afternoon she was strong enough to stand at the stove. "Sit down, I'm cutting it. A keeper of the deepest magic in Britain can at least not look like he's been dragged through the hedge he's hiding behind." And she cut his hair badly with kitchen scissors, talking the whole time about nothing, her granddad's bees, the price of milk, the brute 3 doors down who beat his dog and whom she intended, gift or no gift, to one day deal with. And Harry sat very still under the bad haircut and the ordinary talk, and felt the thing in his chest that had no name, and did not try to name it, because some things, Rowena had taught him, are bigger than the front of a sentence. And you keep them by not putting words around them. The lessons resumed and changed. They were not now lessons against a clock. The threat that had hurried them was dealt with, and Rowena, freed of the need to teach faster than was wise, slowed down and went deep, and Harry discovered that the deep, slow way was harder than the hurried way and infinitely better, and that he had not, in fact, learned the runes at all in those frantic autumn weeks. He had learned to survive them. Now he began to learn to love them, which Rowena said was the only condition under which a person ever truly mastered anything, and the most dangerous, because a person who loves a thing will give their whole life to it, and she watched him fall in love with the oldest language there was, and grieved it a little privately, the grief of the gardener who has chosen what the seedling will become, and must now watch it become exactly that. It snowed in the first week of December, and Rowena Ravenclaw, in the middle of a lesson on the joining of 2 unlike runes, stopped and looked through Harry's eyes at the window where the first fat flakes were coming down past the pondark glass into the warded garden, and said, "Stop, put your hands in your lap, we are finished for today." "We've only been at it an hour," Harry said. "I can do more, I'm not tired." "I did not say you were tired, I said we are finished." Her painted voice had gone to a register he had not heard from her, careful and almost shy, as though she were trying on a coat she had not worn in 1,000 years and was not sure still fit. There's snow falling in a garden that no one in the world can see into, which makes it the only entirely private garden in Britain, and there is a child in my study who has, I would wager, never once in his life been allowed to play in snow without a larger child ruining it for him. And the old man told you to be one occasionally, and he was infuriatingly right, and I have been turning it over for a week, and I find I agree with him, which I shall also deny. She paused. Go outside, Harry. The lesson can wait. The runes have waited 1,000 years. They will wait an afternoon. Go and be 7. It is the one thing I cannot teach you and the one thing you have at least of, and I will not have it said when you are old that you learned the deepest magic in the world from me and never once made a snowball. Harry looked at her and looked at the window and did not move because he did not, he realized, entirely know how. That was the thing no one had told him about being a child, that it was a skill like the runes, like the breath, and that he had never been taught it, had been actively prevented from learning it, and that being handed a snowy garden and told to play in it was, for a person who had spent 7 years being careful and small and unseen, very nearly as frightening as being handed a dark wizard at the gate. He stood in the cold study, 7 years old, and did not know what a person did with a garden full of snow when no one was going to chase him out of it. "Oh, said Hesper from the good chair and put down her thermos and got up, slow and careful with the gray frost still working out of her, and came and stood over him with her hands on her hips. Right, come on, I'll show you, since neither of you has the first idea. She's 1,000 years old and never had a body to throw snow with, and you've had a body and never been let. Pair of you, come on." And she took him by the shoulder, not hard, the first time anyone had touched him in months that was not a fight, and steered him out through the rebuilt hall and the rehung door into the white garden, where the snow was coming down thick and silent over the thorny ropes of the dead roses and the moss-wigged bird bath, turning all of it soft, turning the ruin into something almost gentle. She showed him how to pack a snowball. She showed him, with the grim competence of a northern childhood, how to pat it just damp enough to fly and not so hard it became a stone. Because we're playing, not laying siege, we've had enough siege. And then she threw the first one at him gently, and it burst white against his jumper, and Harry stood there with snow on his chest and an expression on his face that Hesper Thorne would remember for the rest of her life, because it was the face of a child working out in real time. That the thing that had just happened to him was not an attack. He threw one back, it went wide. He threw another, and it caught her on the arm, and she said, "Oi," in a voice with something in it he had never heard from her, something light, and threw one back and missed on purpose so he would not feel he had to let her win. And Harry, who had spent his whole life calculating every move, found that for the length of a snowfall he had stopped calculating anything at all, that he was simply a cold, delighted animal in a white garden flinging snow at a woman who flung it back, laughing. An ugly, graceless, undignified laugh that came up out of somewhere under the wanting place, somewhere that had been locked so long he had forgotten it had a door, and the door was open now, and the laugh kept coming, and he could not have stopped it and did not want to. Inside, in the cold study in her frame, Rowena Ravenclaw watched through the window the great working let her see, the snow and the wrecked roses and the keeper's granddaughter and the child she had waited 1,000 years for, all of it white and laughing and alive in the one garden in Britain that no eye could find, and she was glad, fiercely and privately glad, that she had no body, because a body would have wept, and she had a reputation to keep, even before an audience of falling snow. He came back in, soaked through and red-cheeked and grinning and shivering. She did not make him resume the lesson. She made Hesper find him a dry jumper from her grandfather's old trunk, 3 sizes too big, and she watched him sit by the small fire Hesper had got going in the habitable rooms, swimming in dead Cassius Thorne's wool, drinking tea that was mostly milk, and she said in the dry voice, "You throw a snowball the way you cut your first 100 runes. Appallingly, we shall have to work on it." "You said the runes would wait," Harry said around the tea. With the new graceless ease the snow had shaken loose in him. "The runes will wait. The snowballs apparently will not, since you are a disgrace at them, and a keeper of the deepest magic in the world cannot be allowed to also be the worst shot in Surrey. It lowers the tone." But there was the thing in her painted face again, the pride with the grief folded in it, and Harry, who read faces, read it, and did not name it, and tucked it away with his mother's eyes, in the part of him that kept the things that were too large for the front of a sentence. And he understood, swimming in a dead man's jumper by a borrowed fire with snow melting in his hair, that this, all of this, the painting and the keeper and the warded garden and the milky tea, was the closest thing to a family he had ever had, and that he had built it in a way the same as he had built the array, one fist of meaning at a time out of nothing in a house the world had forgotten, and that no one could take it from him because he had learned from the best teacher there had been in 1,000 years. That the things that are yours are the things no one can take, and that there are more of those than the world ever lets a frightened child believe. He still went back to Privet Drive every night, because Rowena said the protection there was real and worth keeping for a few more years, and because she said, "A person who learns to be free in a cupboard is more free than a person who is merely given a larger room, and I would not rob you of the cupboard until you no longer need what it is teaching you, which will be sooner than they think and later than you would like." Aunt Petunia had stopped knowing what to do with him. He did his chores faster and better than ever and asked for nothing, and looked at her sometimes with green eyes that she had spent 10 years refusing to recognize and could no longer entirely not. And one evening, without a word, she put a second potato on his plate and looked away while she did it, and neither of them ever mentioned it, and Harry understood that it was the largest thing she was capable of, and accepted it in the spirit it was given. Which was the spirit of a frightened woman doing the one brave thing left to her, and he found that he had enough now to have a little pity to spare, even for her, which Rowena said was the surest sign that a person had stopped being a victim and started being something the world would have to reckon with. He washed the day off himself most nights and looked at his reflection in the spotted mirror, the green eyes his mother's eyes, the hair Hesper kept cutting badly, the thin face that no longer looked quite so surprised, and he thought sometimes about a man who had let go and a woman who had stood in a doorway and an old man who had knelt on broken tiles, and he found he had stopped being able to tell, looking at himself, whether he was a small child or a very old one. And decided the question did not matter, because Rowena had taught him that the two were not opposites, that the wisest people she had ever known had kept a child somewhere inside them, and the most foolish had killed theirs young and called it growing up. Then he would go down to his cupboard, which did not feel small, and lie in the dark, which was only dark and not the whole of the world, and make a light, the color of a candle, and hold it without thinking, and by it look at the pencil lines some other small person had drawn long ago and never grown past. He had reached up the first night home, and with a stub of pencil made a new mark above the old one, his own height, higher than the line, the first thing he had ever added to the cupboard instead of merely surviving it. And then beside it, very small, where no one but a person lying exactly where he lay would ever find it, he had cut the threshold rune into the soft old wood here clean on the first try in the dark with his eyes shut, and felt it close, and felt the cupboard become at last not a place he was kept but a place that was his, a here he had chosen, a single pinned point in the fabric of where things are that belonged to no one in the world but him. He was at the Crow House by 9:30 on the Saturday, because Saturdays were the long lessons. Rowena was waiting in her frame, rehung on its wall, the carved leaves and eyes and the letters cut before England, and Hesper was there too, propped in the good chair with a blanket and the thermos, pale and gray-streaked and alive, in the cold study that no one in the world could find, and when Harry came through the wall they both looked at him, and for a moment no one said anything, because some things are too large for the front of a sentence. "Well," said Rowena Ravenclaw eventually, in the dry voice the tide returned to its familiar shore. "You ended a monster, refused a great man, taught the headmaster of Hogwarts 3 runes he did not know, rebuilt my house, made your aunt give you a second potato, and submitted to the worst haircut administered in the British Isles since the reign of the Conqueror. A tolerable few weeks for an infant. I trust it has not gone to your head." "You said I cut a clean here once out of 112, Harry said, sitting down on the floor, cross-legged in his place. "I can do it in the dark now, eyes shut, first try. I did it in the cupboard. You said you'd admit I could do it on purpose. I said I would admit it. I did not say I would admit it today." But there was something in the painted face that Harry had learned to read, that he would have called in a living person and would not say aloud because she would deny it. Pride, the deep, slow kind, the kind that has a grief folded inside it, the grief of watching a thing you love grow past the place where you can keep it small and safe in yours. "Helena," she said unexpectedly, and the study went still, "would have been about your age when I first failed her. Younger. I praised her cleverness across this very floor in another house 1,000 years ago, and she heard under the praise that she was only loved as much as she was clever, and I never once heard her hear it because I was too busy admiring my own daughter to see her." The painted eyes were steady on him. "I have not praised your cleverness, Harry, have you noticed, in all these months? I have called your workings adequate and your runes determined imbecile's luck and your finest hour a tolerable week. I have done it on purpose every time because I will not make your second failure the same as my first. You are not loved here for what you can do. You would be no less welcome through that wall if you never cut another rune as long as you lived. I should have said it sooner. I am 1,000 years old and I am still learning to say the thing that matters before it is too late, which is perhaps the only lesson I have left that I have not yet finished learning myself." Harry sat with that as he sat with all the things too large for the front of a sentence, and he did not say thank you, and she did not wait for it, and Hesper in the good chair blew on her tea and pretended to be looking out of a window that showed nothing but the pond dark, and the three of them held the silence together, which was a thing none of them had ever had before any of them found this house, and which all of them, in their different broken ways, had been starving for their whole lives. "There is a darkness coming," Rowena said at last, gently, because the silence had been long enough and she was who she was. "You heard the old man, years from now when you are grown, or nearly. It will look for power, and it will not be merciful, and the world that left you in a cupboard will need you to be ready, and it does not deserve you, and you will save it anyway, because that is what the people worth teaching always do. It is the most exasperating thing about them. We have until then. It is not very long for everything I have to give you, and everything you have it in you to take, so we will not waste it, but we will not hurry it either ever again. We will go slowly and deeply, and we will love the work, and when the darkness comes it will meet not a weapon I forged in a panic, but a free mind I helped to grow, which is the only thing in all the world that darkness has never once known how to fight, because it has never once bothered to make one. She paused, hands flat. We began. And Harry put his hands flat on the cold floor of a house the world had forgotten, in a study that did not exist, under the painted eyes of a woman who had waited 1,000 years for someone who wanted to know and not to have, with a keeper's last granddaughter watching over them both from a chair that had outlasted the worms. And he closed his eyes, and he breathed 446, and somewhere under the words, in the wanting place, the lost magic of the world stirred and turned over and woke. In a 7-year-old in a cupboard's worth of a child, in the one vessel in 1,000 years built to carry it, and was, after so very long, remembered. Here, said Harry, and cut it clean. Chapter 7 end.